leadership staff. We want to have good relations with our member municipalities and electoral areas. My job is to introduce the leadership team. After the presentation, I'm going to go to my own Signage Council meeting. So I see you have a full audience chamber, but I will be leaving, so I apologize. I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce Mr. Ted Robbins. He is the Chief Administrative Officer of the Capital Regional District. To his right is Mr. Nelson Chan. He is our Chief Financial Officer. Sorry if you can't see through me. To his right is Ms. Larissa Hutchison, who is our General Manager of Parks and Environmental Services. And on the end of the row, Mr. Kevin Lorette, who is the General Manager of Planning and Protective Services. There are two general managers who have sent their regrets. They have been with us on most of these visits to municipal council chambers, and I just would send regrets from Mr. Iain Jesney, is the Acting Integrated Water Services General Manager, and Kristen Morley, who is our Corporate Services General Manager. So thank you. My understanding is we will do a presentation and then there'll be an opportunity for questions, but please know questions can occur at any time after this meeting. And thank you for the time this evening.
Thanks very much, Colin. All right, thank you for the introductions, Chair Plant. Good evening, Mayor and Council, members of staff, and members of the public who are here this evening. As the Chair said, my name is Ted Robbins. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer with the Capital Regional District, and we really want to thank you for providing us the opportunity to come and present to you tonight. We felt it was important early on in the term to come and introduce ourselves, allow us and you to put faces to names, and as the Chair said, make it clear that we're happy to take any questions and receive any concerns throughout the course of your term. And so we thought tonight would be an opportunity to share a little bit about the CRD and a little bit about ourselves, and then, as the Chair said, answer any questions at the end. We know some of you, of course, have been involved with the CRD in the past, either through the board or through our various committees and commissions, but again, thought it would be an opportunity to hit the road, so to speak, and make a presentation to councils. I think this is number 10, so we're on the home stretch now. We do have a few slides to guide the presentation tonight. There are some additional slides that have been included given the time limit. We won't go through all the slides at the end. We do highlight some key projects and initiatives, but happy to take any questions after the presentation or later on regarding those slides. So let's go ahead and get started. So what are regional districts anyway? Well, regional districts are, of course, an order of government established by letters patent in British Columbia back in 1966. And as a result, we have quite a unique local government structure here in BC compared to the rest of Canada. We're the only province that has a regional district structure in the country. Does anybody know how many regional districts there are in BC? There are 27 regional districts in the province. And today, regional districts really serve three primary purposes. And regional districts really arose out of a need for greater regional cooperation on regional and sub-regional matters. And so today, regional districts primarily provide region-wide services, such as solid waste management, regional parks, regional planning, and really those are services that can be provided more effectively and more cost effectively, hopefully through the regional district model rather than having municipalities deal with those services on their own. And the second function we provide, of course, is to provide intermunicipal or sub-regional services. And this is typically where groups of municipalities get together and partner on municipal services that the regional district can provide, again, more effectively through a shared service delivery model. And this is really one of the key features of regional districts, where those municipalities can really determine what services the regional district provides. And like I say, have an opportunity to partner with other municipalities. And as a result, taxpayers really pay for the services they receive, and only those services. And finally, our third function is to provide the local government for the unincorporated areas of the Capital Regional District. And in our case, we have three unincorporated areas. We refer to them as electoral areas, those being Salt Spring Island, the Southern Gulf Islands, and the Juan de Fuca electoral area out in the west. This table is really intended to give you a sense of which level of government provides which services and where the jurisdictional boundaries lie and where those authorities lie. And you see this table, which is not a complete listing of services, but it becomes pretty clear why it's sometimes easy to understand why members of the public are a little unclear as to who provides what services. So just to highlight a few examples, starting with parks, for example, of course, there are municipal parks that you as a municipality would operate and maintain. Then there are, of course, regional parks and local parks in the electoral areas that the CRD would be responsible for. And of course, there are provincial parks. So again, easy to see why it might be confusing for members of the public to understand who does what. And likewise with water and wastewater, again, municipalities typically operate their own municipal water and wastewater systems. In the case of Colwood, of course, the CRD operates the municipal water system through the Wanda Fuca water distribution service. But of course, we also operate sub-regional services like Wanda Fuca. And then of course, the province gets involved in groundwater monitoring and licensing. So again, a few jurisdictional areas there. So again, this table is really just to give you a sense of where the CRD service authority lies and give you a sense of our role in the region. Just for some context, the CRD, of course, covers a large area, about 237,000 hectares to be exact, and the population continues to grow, as you would know. Certainly in this area, continued growth, and currently the population of the regional district sits at about 440,000 people. The regional district is comprised of 13 municipalities and 3 electoral areas, as I mentioned, and there are 18 First Nations who identified parts of the capital region as traditional territory, 11 of which have reserve lands and settlements within the capital regional district boundaries, and many of which receive services either directly through the CRD or through neighboring municipalities. In terms of the governance and administrative structure of the CRD, the governing body, of course, is the CRD board with 21 municipal directors and 3 directly elected electoral area directors, all of who make up the 24-member board. First Nations in the region do not participate on the CRD board. Only modern treaty First Nations have representation on regional district boards in the province, such as the Tsawwassen First Nation, which has a seat in the Metro Vancouver board on the Lower Mainland, but there are currently no treaty First Nations, modern treaty First Nations in the CRD. And the board, of course, establishes standing committees through the board chair each year. We currently have 10 standing committees this year, and generally speaking, recommendations from the standing committees on policies and direction to staff flow up from the standing committees up through the CRD board for decision. And then, of course, in addition to the standing committees, given the nature of regional district service delivery, we have over 70 different committees and commissions that have been established by the board to oversee the operation and administration of sub-regional and local services in the electoral areas. And as you might know, the CRD operates 3 corporate entities. In addition to the Capital Regional District Board, we operate the Capital Regional Hospital District, which was incorporated back in 1967 by way of the Hospital District Act, with a mandate of sharing capital costs for regional health facilities, and the Hospital District Board was established in 1974. And we also operate the Capital Region Housing Corporation, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of the CRD with a mandate to develop, manage and deliver affordable housing across the region. And the same administrative structure applies to all 3 corporate entities. There's a shot of the CRD board for the 2023 to 2026 term. Of course, Director Plant is the current chair of the board. And of course, Mayor Kobayashi is the Colwood director on the CRD board. And this board also represents the Housing Corporation board and the Hospital District board as well. This term, the board has completed its strategic planning work and agreed on these 5 priority areas for the upcoming term, those being transportation, housing, climate action, environment, First Nations, and governance. And some of those may look familiar to you if you've been following the strategic priorities of previous boards. And so at the highest level, of course, these priority areas are for some part a bit of a carryover from the previous board, but this board has determined that there's still lots of work to do under these 5 areas. And so as a result, we were directed as staff to prepare a corporate plan. This is just a cover shot here on the slide. That corporate plan is available electronically through the CRD website. And in that corporate plan, we've identified 134 different initiatives that we will implement as staff through the board to support those 5 priority areas over the coming term. So I encourage you to take a moment and have a look at the corporate plan for the 2023 to 2026 term. Now I'm going to ask Nelson Chan to come up and complete the presentation. He's going to touch on service delivery and some of the financials. Thanks, Nelson.
Thanks, Ted. Good evening, council. Thanks again for the invitation. Really happy to be here and have an opportunity to share some information and really answer any questions that you might have, and maybe give a little bit of an orientation as well on CRD services and the role that we have. Specifically, when it comes to services, Mr. Robbins had mentioned the CRD delivers a number of services, over 200 to be exact. That consists of regional services, which has all participants, sub-regional services, which municipalities can opt in or opt out of, and then local services. Regional districts were formed to deliver those services for the rural areas or the 3 electoral areas that we oversee. I think Mr. Robbins handed out some nice swag. There's some beautiful water bottles there. But my particular piece of swag, unfortunately, is just a piece of paper. But it is something that we call CRD on a page. It lists all of our services minus the local ones. It'd be too hard to read if we included the 100 or so local services. But these are services down one column and then participation or jurisdictions across the other. And you can really see it really speaks to a bit of the a la carte or opt-in, opt-out services that municipalities can join in, where it's cost effective on an economies of scale perspective to have consolidation, to have the regional district deliver those for you. One of the key differences of regional districts to municipalities, at least from a financial perspective, is relating to financials. So while I am the chief financial officer for the regional district, I actually manage 200 sets of books because it's really important that we cost allocate and cost apportion each one of those services separately and don't cross subsidize them. It's really the only fair way to ensure jurisdictions who participate in a cart of services allocate or contribute their proportionate amount for those services to be delivered. So you can see on the left there, regional service delivery or regional budgeting does require isolation of each one of those lines of business versus municipalities that sort of receive funds on a general revenue basis and then can allocate them to whatever service that the municipality deems fit. So just a fundamental difference from an accounting and accountability perspective from regional districts. In terms of a sense of size and scale of scope, as Mr. Robbins mentioned, we do oversee 3 main entities. They're listed there. The regional district itself, which is by far the largest entity, the hospital district by way of the Hospital District Act, and the Housing Corporation, which is the 2nd largest nonprofit housing corporation in the province. We deliver over 2,500 doors and planning to grow that to about 3,500 doors within our 5-year plan. But all in all, roughly about a $700 million organization this year. It's grown as high as about $900 million during my term, which has been about 6 years now, and really driven mostly in capital, but a pretty large organization from a scope and scale perspective. I always say that no finance presentation would be complete without a really ugly table with a bunch of numbers that are kind of hard to read. But this is really a demonstration of the impact on requisition or taxing by jurisdiction within the CRD. You can see Colwood is highlighted there in the bold with a net impact in 2023 of a negative requisition. So taxes in Colwood for the CRD actually decreased by 1.4% in 2023. We were really proud to bring a budget forward through our board and to have our board be able to approve a budget of 2.8%. In context of high inflation rates, I think Greater Victoria experienced a 7% CPI index rate. So to bring a net tax increase of around 2.8% regionally, or negative 1.4 in Colwood, we were really proud of that. So how does that actually break down for Colwood? So you can see here, as I mentioned, the entities that we isolated before. The regional district increase was roughly 2.6%. The hospital district for Colwood was around 1.7%. Debt is required to flow through the regional district. So Colwood debt was reduced pretty significantly in the past for this year. And that resulted in a net impact of negative 1.4% that I mentioned before. For context, on an average cost per household, property taxes in Colwood, when owners receive their tax requisition increase or tax requisition, roughly $526. That's on the average cost per household in Colwood is paid to the CRD, and the rest of the property taxes for the average household are paid to the city of Colwood. You can see for $526 per average household, there's just a snapshot of some of the donut diagram there, some of the major services that the CRD provides. You can see sewer debt is a big component of that, the hospital district, regional parks, and so on. It works out to about $1.44 per day. Not bad, in my opinion. I think that's pretty good value for the service participation that Colwood has in the services that CRD delivered. I bought a coffee this morning, cost me almost $3. So that's inflation for you there. That's pretty much the end of the presentation. There is a section detailing some major capital projects. We won't go through them, but certainly if there's any questions, happy to answer anything in that section or any other questions related to the CRD. I'm going to do my best to quarterback, but just want to take this opportunity to thank council for inviting us. Chair Plant, opened with good communication and good relations. We have great relations with Mr. Earl and Ms. Heptang, and I just wanted to say thanks for that and look to continue that working relationship, but certainly happy to take any questions at this time.
I have a quick question here for you, Nelson. It's the other. What's other? 13%.
Great question, Mayor. So other is we just grouped all of the other services. I got my iPad over there that I can run back and take a look at, but Colwood does participate in a number of regional and sub-regional services. So for the purpose of the donut diagram, we just highlighted the major ones. Other ones would include, climate action is a big one. Participation in any of the arts services. I can't recall off the top of my head, but there's that. It would just be a sort of a catch-all for everything else. But we do have that detail. If you like.
That's great. Thank you. Oh, Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you. Similar to the mayor's comment, I was going to ask about other bespoke services. I would like to order up some of those. I'm just kidding. But I do have a question, and feel free to pass this off to whomever, Nelson, but as we know, the West Shore here is becoming perhaps one of the fastest growing regions, or continues to be one of the fastest growing regions in the country. Yet I recall having moved to Victoria 30 years ago that the Goose Trail was long since paved in Signage, Victoria. And I'm just wondering what the plan would be moving forward for our growing community here, because the pavement ends at Whale Road, and I would argue that certainly Colwood and Langford is built up well past Whale Road, and I believe it's time for this to be added to your list of your future wish list. Perhaps we do know that the Goose Trail is a route for people to commute to work, commute into town regularly. And, we harp about the benefits of cycling. We have cyclists on staff, and just wonder if you can speak to what the future holds for us here.
Sure. Thank you. Through the mayor, I'm going to use my lifeline, and I'm going to call upon our general manager of parks, Larissa Hutchinson, to help me out on this one.
Thanks very much, Nelson, and good evening, council and mayor, and thank you for the question. It's a good one. Certainly appreciate that there's a lot more traffic on the regional trails throughout the whole region. We're very excited that Colwood has secured a grant for the overpass at Whale Road. Paving is going to be really important, transitioning on and off that ramp. So we are definitely working with your staff on safety aspects there, and we're committed to paving that piece. We don't have funds in our 5-year capital plan for paving Colwood and into Langford, those sections of the Galloping Goose. There's a lot of competing interests for capital dollars, both for regional trails and for regional parks. We're going to be bringing forward some reporting to our board around widening and lighting the regional trails within the area around Uptown. But we also are going to be taking another look at our regional trails management plan. So that process will be coming back out to public consultation and to councils, and to prioritize paving of the Goose out in this neck of the woods would certainly be something that we'd want to hear from your residents, and we can incorporate that and prioritize that into our capital planning.
Thank you. And I appreciate that. And I am putting you on the spot. I apologize for that, but
No apologies.
in essence, you know, I just wonder if what's the greater priority, lighting in Saanich or some pavement so people can commute to town to work from out this way?
Student
I'm
Mayor,
being somewhat glib because I don't want to knock Saanich by any stretch.
I agree with you. We have congestion. We have user conflicts on the trail with e-bikes. There's speed issues. We have upped our enforcement on regional trails. And we're very cognizant that these trails have really evolved from linear parks to transportation commuter routes. We are reporting about regional trails to our transportation committee, for example. So we recognize that the use has shifted, and we're trying to take a look with the dollars that we do have, where we can best place that funds.
Yeah, thank you. And I do believe that we're doing our part with this bridge, and in fact, our taxpayers are going to be asked to help build and fund the bridge. So I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Day.
Thank you. My question is for you as well. It's about regional parks. So Colwood has been developing rather quickly, very similar to Langford, and in Colwood, a number of our municipal parks are beginning to function as regional parks as a result of that. Havenwood Park, for example, we're getting a lot of traffic from people wanting to be out in nature in a new location, because all of our parks throughout the region, of course, are getting busier as our population grows. What does it take to get on the list for more park space? Because we're finally realizing, even though Colwood has been very proactive over the last 20 years to achieve something like 53 parks municipally, we do recognize that there's increasing pressure on those parks, and that we need to increase the amount of parkland that is available for all residents of the region in a way that allows them to enjoy all the benefits.
Yes, through the mayor, I agree with you as well. There is a lot of pressure on our regional parks. We have just completed a brand new regional parks and trails strategic plan. That strategic plan is a little bit different than the strategic plan that you may have been familiar with when you came down to CRD board as an alternate, where we're still looking through a conservation lens, but we're also looking at more recreational opportunities within the region. So that's shifting a little bit of the lands that we may be acquiring. We pursue lands according to a specific land acquisition strategy, which we are also going to be consulting on, so that we can prioritize properties throughout or areas throughout the whole region where we want to take a look for acquisitions. We also pursue acquisitions on the basis of willing sellers. So we have to have a property that comes available for us to get engaged. And there is a formal process, and we can follow up on that. If there are properties that residents in Colwood are aware of that may be coming onto the market or are on the market that might be a good fit for regional parks, we'd love to hear about them. They come in and they're evaluated by staff according to some criteria, and then we go through the process from there. So happy to work with Colwood on that.
And is the CRD interested in partnerships? Like there may be opportunities to expand some natural parks where CRD participation might make all the difference to us being able to achieve something like that?
Yes, through the mayor, we are looking for partnerships, and we have had a good history of partnerships with nonprofits in particular, but happy to have any of those collaborative conversations.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions. Is that it, Ted? Then, wow, you guys were quite quick. That's great. Really appreciate you coming out tonight. Thank you very much. So mea culpa on my part. I looked at the question I just asked the public during public participation. I think everybody wanted to speak now. So mea culpa. I'm only human. So at this point in time, I would invite the public to come up and speak. Please.
Good evening, Mayor Kobayashi and Council. I'm Judith Collington, 3338 Acemink. I am speaking tonight on behalf of Signage. So I'd like you all to imagine that actually I'm Carol Brown standing in front of you. So I'll kind of shrink a bit. Okay. I wanted to speak to the item. You have letters from Karen Woodland and Charlotte Gawley with some really interesting ideas around a big ideas fair and a climate panel discussion. And we just wanted to say on behalf of Signage that we're very supportive of this. It's an excellent idea. There are lots of good resources in this community, and Signage is very pleased to help in whatever way we can. That's it, short and sweet. And I wish you all a very happy summer, and Mayor Kobayashi, I hope you get some time off.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Judith. Next, please. You're going to have to press the button. There we go.
There we go. Judy Nault, 274 Belmont Road. And I was going to say that I'm happy to see the draft of the pesticide use bylaw, and especially pleased that there will be public information and education program to go with that. The list of permitted pesticides is very long, and all these products have spillover effects, and people need to be educated about minimizing the use of any pesticides so that natural balance can be restored. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, please.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff. My name is Roger Conrad. I live at 309 Perimeter Place. I'm here to speak this evening to 8.7, the Active Transportation Committee. I'm looking at the motion, and I'm going to propose something to you. Option that the sidewalks be placed to the property line as being option 1. Option 2, the sidewalks are going to be placed 1 meter away from the property line. Option 3, the sidewalks are going to be placed for line of sight. Option 4, they're going to be placed, pick a number, 3 meters away from the property line. So looking at this motion, if staff decide they're not going to move it to the property line, technically they don't have to bring it to this council for approval, because the motion reads, if the option to the property line is going to be considered, it must be brought to the council. So if they don't propose that, technically they don't have to bring it to you. The next part is the little addition here, and I believe it was, oh, and also to that, I believe the Active Transportation Committee meeting was canceled, and there hasn't been a full committee since that time. So the volunteer people that are sitting on that committee have had no input technically to this suggestion. So I would think it would only be fair if people are willing to volunteer their time to sit on a committee to give advice, they have the opportunity to do so. Then we move into the next section. And further that the draft of the 2023 Colwood Active Transportation Network Plan be adopted for master planning purposes. Well, it was about 3 months ago where this council approved to staff to continue to work with the 2022 committee master plan with the active transportation network plan as it was proposed. Now they're asking you to go to the 2023 and you haven't passed that yet. So I think it's putting the cart before the horse. You've got to be able to say, for instance, if I ask anybody, what does the new DC Transit bus stop cost with the double set of lights, the floating pad and the thing? Could anyone give me a number? Is it 35,000? Is it 50,000? Is it 100,000? So how can you vote for this if you don't know what the costs are going to be? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Mr. Sparks.
Hello, my name is Colin Sparks. I'm out in Chosen, but I do a lot of community work in Colwood. My first thing I'd like to speak about is in Colwood, we're finally having an actual walkable, bikeable community in the Royal Bay Area, which is extremely rare for North America. And I think I've seen some signs saying that they want to reduce the biking parking for some of those properties to like almost half of what is currently proposed for the area. That's like reducing it. So I think it would be rather silly that we have the actual infrastructure being put for that, but then to reduce the amount of availability for bike parking was kind of rather silly idea if that gets moved forward. Because at my high school, Royal Bay, there's only like 30, 40 bike spots for some 1,600 students, which sometimes gets overcrowded. So reducing biking spots, especially in an area that's actually built for walkability and cyclability, is a bit of a silly idea. So I hope it's not going to get moved forward to reduce the parking. My second thing is I noticed in the a draft for today for what's being put forward to be spoken about, in there, it doesn't include something I believe that we put forward as a committee, which is having a sort of like a workshop of sorts. I don't know if that was lost in communication or if that's being put forward in the future council meetings. Oh, I was under influence. It'd be today. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Christy Ross. I'm a resident at 2854 Acacia Drive. Speaking in regards to bylaw 1918 at the Sooke Road development. I'm here today because something struck me that wasn't addressed at the last meeting. Council kept indicating the reason they were in favor of voting for this development because of the recent government push, provincial government push for additional housing developments, but that is categorically false. At the height of the pandemic, we received in the area of Acacia Drive multiple predatory pamphlets from developers saying they were working with people in the area who are selling, which was false at the time as we talked to each other. I say predatory as they appear to be handwritten and they were trying to appeal to a certain demographic in a predatory manner. And it's been suggested that those that possibly proposed this development have been deceptive in their location, saying that they lived in the area when they did not. What strikes me is that even though there have been concerns of infrastructure, not enough physicians in Colwood and medical treatment availability, such as walk-in clinics and urgent care, there have been struggles with traffic at this specific area, as well as the whole Colwood crawl that applies to current residents. And privacy concerns for residential homes that will be neighboring this development. And yet still council is not pushing back against the government and pushing for the government to take action with proper land, traffic, and infrastructure assessments. And my question is, I'm just concerned why that is. I'm concerned about the fulsomeness of this discussion. The private developers are seemingly being accommodated and not the residents who are having quite sweeping concerns. I fully support development and growth so long as it benefits the residents in our area and we're mindful of our current residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Next speaker, please. No more? That's it. Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to move to item 7, which is correspondence for council consideration. I just want to remind everyone, this was introduced as a new item at the last council meeting. And the way I personally wish to proceed is as follows. We can look at each piece of correspondence separately, and I'll ask if any counselor wants to move forward with this specific correspondence, or the recommendation be sent to either the committee, the subcommittee, for consideration or action, or no action required, and we move on. It's that simple. Okay, so right now we have two pieces of correspondence that were moved forward for consideration, and they're actually related. Charlotte Gorley, Big Ideas Fair environmental themed proposal, and I'm going to deal with these as two because are together because they are really one. And the second is Karen Woodland's Citizen Climate Environmental Panel discussion and Ask Me Anything forum. So I'll open it up for discussion right now. Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Worship. I will, in the interest of time with a deep agenda this evening, I would move that both those items be referred to the appropriate committee.
Okay, that would be the Environment Committee. Okay. Second, Councillor Day. Thank you very much. Any discussion? Councillor Day.
I just want to add that I think these are both great ideas because more engagement on issues that many of our residents have indicated a passion for is going to be beneficial to getting people comfortable with being involved with the city and giving their opinions. So we want to be facilitating every opportunity to engage and to share information.
Okay, thank you very much. So seeing other pieces of discussion. So the motion right now is that the letters be forwarded to the Environmental Committee for consideration and recommendation. Okay, I will call the question. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Motion approved. Okay, I'm going to move on to, as I said, we're just going to adjust here. We're going to go to bylaws right now. And Councillor Ward, you're still with us. That's great. I know it's late there. Thank you very much for staying up for us. So 8.1 it would be bylaw 1940 cannabis retail 681 Allandale Road for adoption. Can I get a motion, please? Okay, Councillor Day, seconder. Councillor Jensen. Any discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Motion approved. 8.2 bylaw number 1986, the Transit Growth Area 1 zone. That's for adoption. That's bylaw 1986. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I just want to read you a little bit from the Island Health news release that I received today. And it says, and I quote, "Injuries are not accidents. They're mostly both predictable and preventable. Injuries are the outcomes of human-made design and the choices we make as individual," said Dr. Rika Gustafson, Island Health's Vice President of Population Health and Chief Medical Health Officer. "We all hold the power to lessen our risk of an injury. Creating developments," and this is my words, "creating developments with transportation designs that are not intuitive and that do not meet the needs of commuters does lead to poor choices being made by those commuters who are late, in a hurry, or just frustrated. And we need to create an environment of safety for all. It won't just be the person making the poor choice that is affected. It's innocent bystanders, emergency service providers, and hospitals that will have to clean up the mess. My concern is that no transportation implications are identified or addressed by this bylaw. Yet it is a major concern for me that on a major transportation route that may also eventually have frequent transit, and transit is the reason for that increased density in this bylaw. So right in and right out has been our default on transit corridors like this. and it will create safety concerns and does not adequately address an appropriate designation as a location for increased density if it does not include requirements for safe access. It creates more problems than it solves. And who's paying for the services when accidents happen? We are. Ambulance resources funded by the province are not adequate. Neither are the clinics or pretty much the rest of the healthcare system at the moment. And our fire departments have become the first responders. Healthcare implications are not being met by the province, and there's new pressure on municipalities to invest to address this shortfall. So I feel that if we don't address the safety, what is the point of increasing our density?
Thank you very much, Councillor. Any other questions, comments? So I guess I have one question for you, Councillor Day, on this. I mean, what you're saying, you're making a good point. I'll give you that. So would this have to be, would we have to change this for all our zoning then? Because this is one specific zoning. So that's not in the language of our other zoning right now at this point in time. Is that what you're suggesting? That we put that change in overall? Oh, sorry.
So this particular zone, the transit growth zone, is identified on major transportation corridors. And there's nothing in the zoning that permits the additional density that requires that the access be safe. So I'm saying that this particular bylaw needs to be addressed because it's saying that increased density will be approved on the areas that are adjacent to transit growth corridors, which makes perfect sense, so long as you are assuming that the access will be safe. In the consideration of the applications that we've received that are related to this new initiative bylaw, there's nothing that ensures that the safety component is met. So on the one hand, we're saying you have to put density there because it's on a transit corridor, and there's nothing ensuring that that is creating a safe environment for the rest of the citizens using that corridor. And I think some places will work and some places may not, and some proposals will be better than others. And we need to have a condition in there to ensure that it is going to be safe as well as efficient.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jensen.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to move adoption, and then I have a few words, if you don't mind.
Okay, I'll circle back to you. I'm just going to hit Councillor Jordison first.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Jordison.
Thank you, Mayor Kobayashi. So I agree. I agree with Councillor Day, and I actually didn't know whether to bring this forward at this bylaw or the next bylaw, because this issue of this write in and write out, it doesn't sit well with me. It doesn't seem safe. And I think this is an opportunity for the city to think outside the box and to think of other ways to put buildings in with back corridor or service route lanes or whatever in the back, so that they can come up to different lights, intersections that are already there, that sort of thing. Like, I think there's a better way to maybe do this to ensure that it is safe. I'm just not sure it needs to be addressed in this this bylaw or the next.
Okay. Yeah, we can actually do it as a separate one that we have. We could actually make a motion tonight to have staff investigate this for change. I'd be we're very comfortable with that because this is at the 11th hour here. So in all fairness, that was okay. I'll go back to you, Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Your Worship. This transit growth corridor zone that we've gotten right up to the goal line here, quite frankly, and it speaks to a lot of the objectives in this community that we're trying to achieve. And I don't want to be overthinking this. And how do we make our MUEC zone safe? Like I don't know. That's it. Just seems to be such a stretch, and I don't know why the focus is on the transit growth corridor. These are our major thoroughfares. We could see buildings in this next generation that have no in and out because there's no parking spots because there's no cars. So I just don't know how granular we're going to get here. This is big picture zoning. This isn't about specific design guidelines for individual lots. And I have all the faith in the world that our cadre of professional staff understand how to develop a safe situation for our buildings that come forward. So I'm not quite sure where we're going with all this. And I think if we're going to talk about safety in one zone, then quite frankly, I think we should talk about the MUEC zone. Let's make that safer. Let's talk about our commercial zoning. What can we do there? Like, it just opens Pandora's box. And I think that we do need to leave this to some of our professional staff. And I would move adoption, Your Worship. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Ward, sorry, I didn't see your hand there virtually.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some good questions are raised there, and I think it's been something that's been sitting with me for a number of weeks now. We adopted this or have come close to adopting this transit growth zone, but there are some unanswered questions. And the safety argument is one, certainly. I think Councillor Jordison, though, touches on something that I find, interesting, is that we don't have, corresponding traffic planning in place with some of these developments, and nor necessarily should we in its entirety. I think the long-term vision is what we're aiming for here, which is a true transit corridor, whereas Councillor Jansen said, in many cases, there'll be significantly reduced, use of personal vehicles and things like that, but we don't live in that reality yet. And we have to acknowledge that where we are now and where we're trying to go to are two different places. And I would like to see a little more planning go into this. I don't think it's fair to just accept that, okay, put in a high density building and just assume that everyone's going to turn right and they're going to go take the long way around, Kelly Road all the way over to Veterans and so on. The reality is many of those neighbors in the area have stated is that they'll turn into Acacia and do a U-turn or into a driveway and around. And, to properly do a right turn in and out scenario, you would have to physically put in some barriers and things. And I mocked up a map on this that I can share at a later date, but you'd have to run that all the way from Aldine essentially, or at least from Hatley Park, all the way up to Mountain View, where you could then have a turnaround, a 2-lane roundabout essentially, where those vehicles coming from new developments, coming from Acacia and coming from Hatley Park would have to come up and turn and then go down the other way. Without doing that, we risk exacerbating some of the problems. But I also think that, this isn't a new issue. Former Mayor Hamilton is on record in the media in 2016 talking about, Sooke Road as a growth corridor. So this isn't new, and I think we haven't done a good job, though, of finding this intermediary planning phase. And I agree with Councillor Jansen. I think we can't stop. We have to move forward to recognize that, that this will be a growth corridor for us, much like Royal Bay is in other areas. But we need to take a long look at the master transportation plan subsequent to any decision making tonight and say, how do we fix this? We can't simply sort of throw our hands up in the air and go, well, 10, 15 years from now, it'll sort itself out. We need to make this a high priority and move it up the list. So that's just my thoughts on that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ward. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I've been struggling with this issue for some time, and we haven't yet convened our transportation committee to deal with these issues. And I have really been struggling with it, but I do know a great deal of history and what the unintended consequences have been in the past. there have been major, very expensive changes made to Sooke Road in the past because of fatalities that have occurred in places along that corridor. The whole road has been reconfigured at great expense because of safety issues where developments were approved and roadways were approved without consideration for those things. So if we're trying to build a bylaw to facilitate increased density on transit growth corridors, we have to ensure that we are doing so in a cost-effective way for our citizens' health and well-being long into the future. And just saying that we'll figure it out doesn't address the economic sustainability over the long term. So I'm happy to have this go back to staff and look at how we could, and it doesn't need to be a wholesale revision. We just need to know that we have a safe access and egress for every increased density proposal that we approve. And we can't fail on that, because that intersection that is the closest to this development has had numerous concerns for school children and crossing guards. And that is a documented fact in the history of Colwood as well.
As I said, we'll do a separate motion on that. Okay, so you want to make the initial motion then for adoption then on the transit growth zone, area 1 zone adoption. Seconder on that, please. Councillor Grove. Discussion. I'll call the question on just the zoning right now for the adoption of the zoning. All those in favor? And those opposed? Councillor Day and Councillor Ward, I saw you stick up your hand. You were for, Councillor Ward?
I was in favor, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Just the only opposed is Councillor Day. And I'll open it up right now, Councillor Day, for you to make a motion.
I would move that we.
Whoops, sorry.
I would move that we refer this to staff for consideration of potential amendments to the transit growth bylaw to ensure safety of access and egress.
We'll have a seconder on that. Can I make another suggestion?
Sure.
To move this? I think this is something that should be tackled in our TMP. Like it should be a something that we have in our TMP.
Sure.
That I would be more attuned to approving that instead of on the zoning right now, but to make sure that we address it in our TMP. So it is addressed right across the board. Anyways, that's my compromise on that.
Okay, seeing no seconder for actually. Oh, okay.
Sorry, Iain, you seconding Councillor Day's motion? Okay, sorry. So we have a discussion. So as I said before, I would suggest, this is just my suggestion, to get this thing passed. I think just trying to read the room here a little bit. I really would like to see this as part of the TMP and addressed in the TMP. And it's looked at right across the board. Okay, sure. Councillor Day. Whoops, Councillor Day.
There we go. So given that I see the reluctance to change the zone, I guess we'll have to address it through the transportation master plan. And that so my motion would be that we look at the transportation master plan to address the transit growth corridors.
Okay, so you're amending your initial motion. We had a seconder. Or do we want a friendly amendment?
I'm very confused as to where we are.
You made the motion to have it as part of the zoning, and then it was seconded by Councillor Ward.
Yes.
Then I just made a suggestion because I'd like to see this, and I'm trying to get away there right now. So this is
Great.
why I suggested that it be in the TMP.
So, but then when I tried to do what you're suggesting, you've said that I've already got a motion on the floor. So
Yes,
could you tell me what's on the floor?
That council refer to staff for potential amendment of the transit growth bylaw for safe access and egress of developments in the transit growth area 1 zone.
Okay, so I guess I'm proposing an amendment to accomplish that through the transportation master plan. And would you second the amendment, Councillor Ward?
Okay, there you go, seconder. Discussion on the amendment. No, you okay? See no other discussion on this. I'll call the question. All those in favor of the amendment? Okay. Oh, there we go. Unanimous. And call the question on the original motion as amended. All those in favor? As amended. Yes. Okay, there we go. That's unanimous also. I think Councillor Grove, I didn't see your hand. I'm assuming you were in favor. Okay, perfect. That motion is approved. Okay, thank you very much. So we'll go to 9.3, which is bylaw number 1989, land use bylaw amendment 2054 to 2076 Sooke Road, third reading. I'm going to ask for the motion and a seconder right now so we can get a discussion on this. Okay, Councillor Olson, seconder Councillor Grove, and I'll open it up for discussion. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I think it's fairly clear that I do not support this bylaw for the 5-lot consolidation, and my issue is around the access and egress to the site and the impacts on the adjacent neighbors.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other discussion? Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had a few comments, and I think I said them last time, so I'm not going to flog it too much. But although I'm in favor of the transit growth corridor in principle, and I supported it, moved it, this particular location, I do believe the proposed engineering, which is the right in, right out into perhaps the 5th lane, which may be a rapid bus lane, I do have some concerns with. And I want to be clear, and I want to be clear to the public. I'm not afraid of the density in that location. I think it's a good place for it. I have heard some of the concerns from the neighbors, and I believe, with some work with staff and the proponent, perhaps they could bridge that gap. But just the current configuration, I struggle with slightly. I believe that's the most compressed zone for the Sooke Road upgrades that could be coming in the next few years. And I do have some concerns. I would be more comfortable if there was an acceleration and deceleration lane, which was proposed. So in other words, it would be, I guess, a 5th or a 6th lane there where someone would scoot out of traffic to slow down to pull into the development, or inversely, as they're leaving, they would accelerate away. And I do have concerns, as Councillor Ward mentioned, that to mitigate some of that, crossing of Sooke Road, potential crossing of Sooke Road by motorists would require an engineering solution that would be costly and would require several blocks of barricade being put in. So for those reasons, I'm going to oppose this. But I do want to be clear, it's not because of the building or the configuration or the floor area ratio or any of that. It's purely some of those concerns that we've spoken to. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Jordison.
Thank you to the chair. I guess I just want to point out that to the residents that are here this evening, that this property, this section of property has been purchased by a developer. So if this isn't passed tonight, it's going to come back again. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that, it's going to be something and something different than what is there currently. So I think that, you know, I experience this myself in where I live and what's happening around me. And it's one of those unfortunate things. But I do have one question, and maybe for staff. And my question was in regards to the in and out. Was a proposal made from the developer to have the building exit and enter off Acacia or off a different location than right off Sooke Road? Was that something that was brought forward and wasn't entertained, or did that ever come up in discussion?
Desiree?
Thank you, Councillor Georgeson, through the mayor. The properties wouldn't be able to have access off of Acacia Drive, as there's several single family homes right behind it. So Sooke Road is the only option, and the safest option right now, as has been considered through their transportation engineers, to do a right in, right out only. John Rosenberg is here tonight if you have any questions about the transportation impact assessment that was submitted by the applicant, but it has been reviewed and accepted by our engineering department. So, and no, it hasn't been considered.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Grove.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that the last time I spoke to this right in, right out thing issue and the possible roundabout, maybe so folks didn't have to do these really creative U-turns in the middle of Sooke Road, which I've witnessed on more than one occasion. I also am cogent of the fact that that strip of Sooke Road it reads more like 70 speed limit. If you're traveling 60, 65, you're the slowest car on the road. So this concerns me when folks will start slowing down. I don't know if the possibility of a static intersection is one at Mount View. These things exist for a reason. I don't think that it's a wonderful thing. And if you're commuting through to Sooke, it's a pain to be have traffic interrupted, let alone myself. When I'm traveling there, I'm just not sure that right out works. And this bothered me a great deal last time when I voted. I was not particularly in favor of it. That particular problem, there's got to be a solution. If I were to see it, I would be happy to support it because the density, the transit location, we discussed all these elements at great length. So I have a hard time supporting this for that reason.
Thanks very much. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd echo the comments. I'm obviously very, I'm torn. I'm sympathetic to the folks that are there, the folks who live in the immediate vicinity. Anytime you add a higher density structure to a single family residential area, there's pain associated with that. Much like Councillor Georgeson, I've experienced that. I've had a high density building, 5 stories move right next door to me. And, I don't love it. I didn't love it. And one of the reasons I felt some frustration at the former council. From the outset, though, I said that I believe in responsible development and sustainable development, and doing so guided by an OCP that even preceded my term on council. I think you have to have a plan, a community-driven plan that people buy into. This is bigger than me. It's bigger than everybody on council. We're here to make the decisions, but the community put this plan together. And as I mentioned earlier, this goes back to 2016, where community feedback was solicited from across Colwood, not just the neighborhood in question. And it led to this formation of the OCP, which speaks to development along the Sooke corridor, along Whale Road area, obviously, and near the rec center area. Royal Bay, of course, as an obvious one. Some with impacts less tangible than others. We talk about traffic problems and we're talking about Sooke Road. Well, just wait till doubling the density in Royal Bay, comes to fruition. Decisions made years ago have ramifications. So this building in isolation, it adds to it. But at the end of the day, our name as a community is ubiquitous with traffic. It's the Colwood crawl for a reason. And it has far more to do with an entire region than it does a single structure along Sooke Road. This will add a few cars to the mix. It's less than an ideal because we don't have the ideal yet. We don't have the transit corridor built out the way we want to see it built out by BC Transit. We don't have traffic control measures in place, you know, a roundabout at Mount View Road. We don't have traffic pylons to eliminate U-turns all the way up. Now, there are some lesser expensive modes we can deploy. And I would suggest that, you know, if this development is read in tonight and moves forward, that we as a city owe it to the residents of that area not to just stop and move on, but to identify ways to address issues so that, that they don't face problems. And it may mean some uncomfortable discussions. It may mean that there's no, you know, non-resident parking on Acacia, for example, you know, or resident only parking or limited term parking for visitors, so they're not impacted there. It may mean right turn only all the way from Hatley Park up to Mount View as a start, you know, so there's impacts here, but we have to govern according to a set of rules, or else it's just free for all every time we sit down together at the table. And to me, that means following our official community plan until such time as the community says otherwise. There's 2 times they say otherwise: at the redevelopment or, you know, revisiting of the official community plan, and at election time. And, you know, I have to look in the mirror at the end of the day and think, okay, have I done the right thing for 20,000 people? And I believe in this case, putting density where it belongs is the right thing, even if it upsets some folks. And I get it. Like I said, I've been there. I'm upset. This will be the most difficult decision I've made yet, because I don't love it. I won't, you know, applaud and you know, salute myself and drink a beer for the fact I approved a development that's going to impact, you know, 4 or 5 homes behind it and some other folks around. It's difficult, but we have to think bigger picture. And long term, if we can't put this development here, where can we put it? And in Colwood, there's a history of being short-sighted about what we do. That's why we have these traffic problems that we have, because we're making knee-jerk decisions, and year over year over year, we do things like that, and we don't take a strategic view on where do we want to go. We just look at where we're at. So I'm prepared to make the difficult decision, but I just want to be on record as saying, no, I don't love it. Then at the end of the day, you know, I'll be able to look in the mirror, but I won't feel good about it. But I know it's still the right thing to do. But we have work to do, though, now to prove to those folks in that area that it was the right thing, that long term, the impacts on them can be mitigated when we get to the place we're aiming to get to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just have one question. I wasn't clear on this bylaw. Did we couple parking with the residences, or did we decouple?
Thank you, Mayor. We decoupled them, so the parking for the units is not included in the rent. It's going to be charged separately.
So I guess that's what I thought, you know, and this really bothers me. I'm caught between a rock and a hard place on this one, because I'm just looking at what happened with Ani and their development. And I guess if you decouple, here's the problem. Those that choose not to, that don't have a parking spot now, are parking on the street, which is actually cluttering up the neighborhood, which is going to get a lot of citizens mad at us, even worse than, you know, if this bylaw were to pass. I think, I know it's a debate we haven't had, but I think it's a mistake. I know some of our sister municipalities have passed bylaws which couple them. Some have decoupled. I know that it's a real mix, but we really haven't had that debate. But I think we're just adding fuel to the fire by decoupling this, because you know that people are going to be, this is human nature. They're going to start parking on the streets, those apartment blocks that don't have parking associated with the apartments. But that's my feeling on this right now. And so I think it is a mistake, and that's one thing that I would like to have changed on this, to tell you the truth. Councillor Jordison, please.
Thank you, Mayor Kobayashi, for that. That's a good catch. And I really agree with you on that. And I wonder if there's a way to make a motion to, I don't know, at this stage to, I just think it's not even just if they want parking or not. It's, you know, by the time they afford the rent, can they afford a parking spot? And then it causes problems within the neighborhood. And, you know, it comes down to the affordability piece too. is there a way to make a motion at this point to have that included at this stage, or?
Yes.
So it would be it's decoupled right now,
Yes.
so uncouple? What is?
Or you'd want to couple it.
You want to couple it?
Yeah. So if you're going to make that motion, I'm just going to go to Councillor Ward first.
Okay.
And then I'll come back to you.
Okay.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just for reference, I should note that the Land Use and Planning Commission did discuss this at length with the proponent and city staff. And there's a couple scenarios here I think we need to talk about. So the Ani development is a bit unique in that, much like 360 Latoria, Council of the Day agreed to reduce the parking space allotment for the actual units being constructed. So at Ani, not only do you have the issue that, okay, these were decoupled, if you will, and being charged for, they didn't build enough. So to begin with, you already were going to have a potential issue if everybody in that building owned a vehicle. So that is an issue that we're not facing here. It's worth noting, and I certainly don't speak for any developer, I can tell you that, but in this case, the developer has adhered to Colwood's parking requirements and has provided enough parking lots. Enough parking spaces. So that was one item that that certainly resonated with the planning committee, was that that enough parking spots were available. The second was its placement, obviously, on a transit growth corridor. There should be an expectation eventually being the keyword, that you'll see some reduced vehicular traffic, but you also have no street front parking in front of the units. There would be no ability to park along Sooke Road, so you can't fill a neighborhood. Where the challenge could emerge, and I'd referenced this previously, is that conceivably you could have individuals drive all the way around into Acacia, park in the end of Acacia Court, and use the park as a cut through to get to it. So the folks that are really looking to find that free parking, it's like water downhill, it'll find a way. That's where you heard reference previously, Mr. Mayor, to the notion of resident only parking on Acacia Court, for example, time limited visitor parking there. Colwood has fairly straightforward bylaws about ensuring that individuals with rental suites, for example, have adequate parking for those suites. So conceivably, there would be no issue. Residents would have their own driveways to park. There would be designated visitor parking with a time limit, or you could have a regulated parking mechanism. So again, that's what I alluded to earlier as difficult discussions, because this would be a first for Colwood, but it certainly would go some extent towards addressing the unique situation here. Again, a situation that I would say is vastly different than the Ani development, where you have significant surface parking lots for the retail component, where people simply said, well, geez, I'm not going to pay for parking, I'm just going to park up there instead. Hence the introduction of a rather draconian parking mechanism. So again, I'm not going to defend it, but that was the logic that the committee took when reviewing the proposal from the proponent.
Thank you very much for clarifying that, Council Ward. I guess the only pushback I'll give you on that is that I know I've already on Colwood Crescent, I've received complaints. Now that they put that paid parking in, the people that are living in the residences are now parking on the street on Colwood Crescent, which is, I guess at nighttime it fills up pretty much, especially during the day when the school is operating. It's being filled up now, so it's not. Everything is right in theory on how it should work, but it just doesn't seem to be working. So I guess that's where I'm having some issues right now. I mean, when I moved back to Victoria, I came from Edmonton, and everything was, everything was coupled. Everything was, and if I wanted to give up my parking space, say I didn't use a car, then I can always rent it out to other people in the condo units, or in the apartments. So that's how they worked it there. So but I know this sort of concerns me, because this is just going to aggravate the situation, and I'm so cognizant of this right now that I'm observing it, I'm hearing it, and now we're repeating the same mistake. That's how I feel about it. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I just want to speak to some of the history with parking in Colwood. There were a number of developments that were done in the early 2000s on relatively smaller streets where there was potentially insufficient parking, even just for the houses that were built. They were our very first small lot subdivisions, and where they were created, there was no available on-street parking on the transportation corridor leading to them, which meant that there was no parking if they were going to have people over for a birthday party or an anniversary celebration. There was absolutely zero visitor parking. And the result of that was that where cycle lanes existed on the transportation corridor, people started parking in the cycle lanes, and or in parks that were adjacent, or because people do have celebrations and they do need visitor parking. So I am very much in favor of coupling parking requirements with apartments. I understand the affordability argument, but that can be addressed by the ability to, as the mayor pointed out, rent out those parking spaces as parking becomes more desirable in these locations. And we have to consider all the aspects of a person's life in living in the city that they've chosen to live in. Hopefully it's Colwood, and for them to feel that all of the same things that are available to other homes are available to them. So I think it's very important for people's well-being that they're able to socialize and enjoy their lives with visitors from time to time, and a place for them to fit that isn't shoehorned in either at the expense of a neighborhood that's adjacent or other quarters that are critical to our functioning.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Council Ward, you had your hand up?
Yeah, sorry, I missed it on my last round there, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, I know I'm on number 3 here. Councillor Jordison, I don't think received the answer to the question maybe she was looking for, if I heard the question right, because I had the same question. I was led to believe through a conversation, which I won't get into detail now, that the developer had initially looked at purchasing a lot or lots, and I know he's in the audience, could maybe verify this, but had looked at purchasing a lot or lots behind the subject properties to look for egress onto Acacia Court to feed into the existing road rather than have any entry or exit onto Sooke Road. And I understand that it was actually at city direction that he chose not to pursue this. It became a rather onerous task. So, you know, I don't want to name names at the moment because I don't think that would be appropriate to put staff on the spot, but this was a conversation I was privy to, and I thought that was interesting that the direction to the proponent was to go the route he's gone, you know, in good faith, versus exploring an option that certainly would have made sense. And I know Councillor Jordison and I have discussed, you know, what you could have done with a service road. For example, if you bought another property on Acacia and ran it right through to Glencairn all the way up to Mount View, you don't have these issues anymore. You have traffic going through a back road versus popping out onto Sooke Road. But, you know, I'm just a little concerned here too, that we as a city don't seem to have our ducks in a row, if you will, in terms of the direction that we're giving, you know, giving developers. And I would use the example again, further up the road in this transit growth discussion, you've got another proposal for a building that is denied, you know, because of size and scale, because, well, it's too big to be against single family homes, but it's not really that much further away than this one. And their entry point is off Linlark. It's off a side street. So I know we're doing a dance in circles here, but I'm having a hard time getting, you know, behind one side or the other, because we're not really making the ends meet on this thing. So I'll freely admit I'm changing my position as I speak. At the end of the day, if we can't decide what the right direction is, you know, I don't know which way to vote anymore. So it's a little frustrating. I'm not gonna you know, I'm not going to beat around the bush on it. I find that until we get our act together, we shouldn't be, you know, even hearing these things. This is getting a little bit ridiculous. It's my take.
Thank you. Councillor Jordison.
So developer here this evening would like to speak to that. Thank you.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. Cameron Salisbury, Director of Development with West Urban Developments. Speaking directly to this issue, we did in our due diligence explore lots and purchases to the north of this, as we would in any lot consolidation. At the time, though, we decided to move forward with 5 lots fronting on the Sooke Road because it was a complicated process to engage with the north properties to go through that route. And I also wanted to address the parking issue. Our preference is to not couple the parking, but we are okay if the parking gets coupled to the units. So as per the committee recommendation originally.
Sorry, you said they are coupled?
No, we are in favor of them being uncoupled, but we're okay. Our preference is to be uncoupled, but we're okay if they are coupled to the units. So.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please. Yeah, you're still on.
So sorry, I just wanted to ask you, so you did you explore going further back and purchasing more homes so that you could come out onto Acacia or Court or no? Nelly Court or?
Three, I thought I flipped it, sorry. Through your worship. We look at doing that in all the developments we do. We explore different options because Sooke Road is such a major corridor. But because of the fronting onto Sooke Road, we decided not to pursue it any further than speaking with it. And there wasn't much interest in selling those lots behind it either, from what we understood.
Okay, thank you so much.
Councillor Grove.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The issue of transit seems to me we talk about density on transit routes and the transit's not really there. And I'm not sure when it will be. Until we make transit the priority, it should be there first, and it should be driving the desire to build around those transit nodes as they develop, is my opinion. I've seen it in other cities. I'm no expert. I grew up in a large city where that took place. You could see it happening year over year, decade over decade. You develop a transit node, and within a few years, there's towers building within walking distance of that transit service. We try to lay this concept of density with transit to get people out of the cars, and then we build the density, and we do what? We live with awkward U-turns on a busy, dangerous road. Until when? I don't know. It's a weird, it got under my skin at the beginning of this process with this particular proposal. I understand that the residents have many other issues of privacy and view and noise and so on. It is a big city. And I think when we live in a city, we sort of take on a social pact, if you will, that of acceptance of change. It's going to happen. It does happen. I'm not sure it's anything but the way it goes. So for me, if the transit situation, which to me already on Sooke Road is untenable and getting worse by the month, we're off of COVID now and seeing a return to volumes that reminisce of from 2019. And somehow it has to be dealt with as a priority. And I just feel that we have things perhaps around backwards a little bit in terms of our treatment of the access issues to roadways and transit and so on. And it is a difficult decision, but I would feel I feel I can't support this bylaw change for that reason. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jordison, did you still want to make your motion? Did we actually make the motion for this particular? We haven't yet, right? Okay, so, okay, do you want to make the amendment?
Your worship, if I may.
Yes, please, Mr. Earl.
If Councillor Jordan is seeking to couple the parking,
Yes.
at the May 1st Planning and Committee meeting, the recommendation to committee was that the owner register the Section 219 covenant over the lands that agrees to allocate parking for each residential unit as required by applicable City of Colwood bylaws and ensures that the allocated residential parking is not provided in exchange for additional compensation separate from the rent received for each residential unit. That was the wording that was recommended to committee. This wording requiring the applicant to register such covenant would have the effect of coupling the parking. The covenant would be registered on title, not part of the zoning, but a requirement of the zoning. And so if council were to make this recommended motion, as I just read, that would couple the parking should the zoning proceed.
Does that work for you, Councillor Jordan? Okay. So can I get a seconder to that amendment? Okay, Councillor Olson. So did you get it all, Amanda? Wow, I'm impressed. So discussion on the amendment. So I will call the question on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment? And that's unanimous. So that the amendment is approved. So we'll go back to the main motion. Could you just repeat who made the motion for the main motion and the seconder, please?
Councillor Olson has approved or has moved the motion.
Okay, that's right. Okay.
Councillor Grove had seconded.
Okay, set, perfect. And so on the motion as amended, any discussion? Councillor Day?
Thank you. It's a better motion because of the amendment, and I did support the amendment, but I won't be supporting the whole 5-lot consolidation subdivision because we do not have any resolution to the right in, right out issue with the Sooke Road access.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion as amended? All in favor? As amended. Okay, so and those opposed? So opposed, Councillor Grove, Councillor Day, and Councillor Jensen. So the motion is approved. Okay, we'll hit new business now. I think I've got through all the bylaws. And our first item is development variance permit for 3608 Ryder Hesjedal Way, and that is the Royal BC Museum. And Kaitlyn, get you to come up and introduce it. This is 9.1 or 8, former 8.1. We're going to get through.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So good evening, everyone. My name is Kaitlyn Suzuki. I recently joined the City of Colwood as a planning technician. So today I'll be presenting on the development's variance permit application for 3608 Ryder Hesjedal Way. So the applicant is requesting relaxation to the off-street parking regulations bylaw, section 5, bicycle and mobility parking requirements for the construction of the Royal BC Museum, Provincial Archives and Research Facility containing public gallery spaces. So these variances would vary section 5 to decrease the number of required short from 78 to 50, the number of required long-term bicycle parking spaces from 62 to 41. It'll decrease the number of required electrified short-term bicycle parking spaces from 10 to 6, decrease the number of required showers from 6 to 2, and increase the maximum distance between end-of-trip facilities and long-term bicycle parking from 50 meters to 76 meters. For some site context, 3608 Ryder Hesjedal Way is located in the Latoria South area of Royal Bay. It is within Area 9 of the Comprehensive Development or CD28 zone, and it's designated as transitional mixed use within the Latoria South sub-area plan. So in regards to the OCP, it is supportive of museum use in Area 9 in the Latoria South sub-area plan. The OCP is also very supportive of cycling as a form of transportation, including the provision of bicycle facilities. So these are detailed in certain objectives and policies with requirements for short-term and long-term bicycle parking. So the off-street bicycle parking regulations bylaw contains bicycle parking requirements within section 5. And these are based on the building use. So the proposed facility will fall under civic use for bicycle parking requirements. And based on the gross floor area of the proposed facility, 62 long-term and 78 short-term bicycle parking spaces are required. The applicant is requesting a variance to reduce the number of required bicycle parking spaces to 41 long-term and 50 short-term. So as mentioned, the bicycle parking requirements are determined based on the use of the building. However, civic use may not accurately reflect the intended use of the proposed facility. So approximately 54% of the facility will be used as collection, storage, and loading. So this area would be expected to have little to no public access, and it's also expected to have fewer employees on site than other civic uses might. So kind of as a comparison, if the industrial use bicycle parking requirements were used for this collections and loading area, then the bicycle, and if the civic use requirements were then used for the remaining area of the building, the requirements would be reduced to 38 long-term and 41 short-term bicycle parking spaces, which would be met by the proposed facility. So 3 additional variances have been requested. So the off-street parking regulations bylaw requires 20% of provided short-term bicycle parking spaces to be electrified. Based on the number of short-term bicycle parking spaces proposed, 10 would need to be electrified. So the applicant is requesting a variance to further reduce the number from 10 spaces to 6 spaces. The applicant is also requesting 2 variances with request to end of trip facilities. They're requesting a reduction in the number of required showers from 6 to 2, and for an increase in the maximum permitted distance between long-term bicycle parking and end of trip facilities from 50 meters to 76 meters. These changes are proposed in consideration of the expected number of employees using the end of trip facilities. So development notification signs have been posted on site as per council policy, as well postcards were sent to neighboring properties within 75 meters of the subject property, advising of the consideration of the requested variances. So there are a few options for council to consider. Council may wish to approve all 4 requested variances, which were a decrease in the number of short-term and long-term bicycle parking spaces, a decrease in the number of electrified short-term bicycle parking spaces, a decrease in the number of required showers, and an increase in the maximum distance between long-term bicycle parking and end-of-trip facilities. Alternatively, you could approve a selection of the previously mentioned variances, defer for further information, or deny this application. Okay. Thank you very much for your time. I'm available to answer any questions. Additionally, I believe the applicant is also available.
Thanks very much, Kaitlyn. Councillor Day.
Thank you. In the interest of time tonight, I actually have no questions. It was a really excellent report. And I do have a recommended motion that's very consistent with the recommendation in the report with a slight change that I will explain. So I'm recommending that we approve the variances to the number of short and long-term bicycle spaces. So there would be 50 short-term and 41 long-term bicycle spaces. So that's the A in the recommendation. But I'm proposing a change to B regarding the number of electrified short-term bicycle parking spaces from 10 to 6. Instead, I'm suggesting in my motion that we retain the number of electrified bicycle parking spaces at 10, 6 short-term and 4 long-term for staff parking of electric bikes. And as the same as the recommendation for C and D, that we decrease the number of showers required from 6 to 2, and that we increase the distance between the end of trip facilities and the long-term bicycle parking as recommended. And I'm asking to add one item, which is to facilitate staff with mobility challenges, which I believe should be encouraged to assist with future hiring in this tight labor market that we're in, by adding 2 designated electric charging locations for staff mobility scooters within the building, as well as retain the 2 public mobility scooter parking spaces that are identified on the plans that are submitted. And my rationale is that while not all of the floor area will be public, all presentations to date have envisioned greater educational links and visitations for the public, including greater links with schools and classrooms. And like all employers, the museum will be facing the same issues of training and retention of staff, and would be in a better position to do so with greater engagement of the public, as well as accommodation for staff who have more diverse abilities. And that the transportation choices for this building will be greatly enhanced by the provision of options to make it easier for long distance commuting by the least overwhelmed system option, which is our bicycle lanes. And the addition of more electric bike charging offsets the reduction in the end of trip facilities because electric bikes probably don't cause you to sweat half as much when you're going up the hill. And that may reduce providing the infrastructure for electric bike charging could reduce the need for showers in the building. So that is my motion. I'm hoping that someone will second me.
I'll second that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Grove. Okay. Discussion on the motion. Councillor, oh, I'll let you go, Councillor Ward. Seems it's getting very late in Ontario.
Sure is. Yeah, no, thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I agree completely with everything Councillor Day said. My first inclination was just to state that I wanted to hold the line on the number of short-term electrical bicycle spots there. I think 10 is entirely reasonable. It's an increasingly a popular mode to commute, and people who are going to come, visit the facility, the half that is, public access from time to time, increasingly may choose that form of transport. So I think we have to think again longer term. And keep that in place. So that was my only disagreement, is I didn't think it should be at 6 moving forward to the 29 long term. I think it should stay at 10, and I'd be happy to keep the long term at 29. But that's the only proposed amendment I would make to the motion, is to maintain the 10 and the 29.
That's what it was.
It was proposed to reduce it to 6 on the short term with 29 on the long term. And Councillor Day suggested, I guess, bringing the number up to 10, but keeping 6 on the short term and moving 4 over to the long term. So I just want to be curious if she's intending to make that 33 long term and 6 short term. So maybe clarity just from Councillor Day on that.
Can I before we go any further, Kaitlyn, can you just give us the rationale for the decrease in the number of short and then the increase in the number of long-term, please?
Sure. So the proposed electrified bicycle parking that was indicated on the plan was 6 short-term and 29 long-term electrified parking spaces. As to, I guess, the rationale behind the reduction from the 10 to 6.
35, but now more long-term, less short-term, just the rationale. I think this is why everyone's making these motions here.
For sure. The applicant might be able to speak to that a bit better.
Right.
I'm Michael Green from Michael Green Architecture. We're the architects for the project. So there are 35 electrified spaces we have. And based on this notion of decreasing the overall parking based on the use of the building, it would require us to have 31 spaces in total. We have biased those towards long-term use because it is much more of the use of the building will be employees, with a very small percentage being the visitors to the facility. So we biased it that direction. So that's the answer to that.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you very much. Councillor Jansen.
Thank you, Worship. I too had the same inquiry, so I do appreciate that. It does feel counterintuitive that we're here sort of shaving some bike parking spots off the top, but what I'm getting, or if I'm picking up what everybody's laying down here, that the specific use of that building and the design of the building lends itself to this kind of reduction, that we're not having the numbers of visitors piling in there, but we have accounted for the staff. Sorry, do I have all that right? I'm not sure, Mr. Mayor, do we need that, or I think we're picking up?
Not unless you need it, but
I'm good. I'm picking up
with you. You tell us.
So correct. A large percentage, about 70%, a little more than 70% of the building is storage areas where people don't work. They will visit it, and it's very secure facility where the public cannot go. Okay. And so because of that, it's not, a public library where there's lots of use. It's very limited areas where there's staff or public actually using it. And that's this reduction.
Thank you. And I appreciate the Councillor Day's motion. And if there's a slight amendment or whatever, I'm not fussed, and I can see myself supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Day.
So I guess I'm confused because I was trying to get my ducks in a row for this, and I did a copy paste of the recommendation from the report. And I had the short-term bicycle was being recommended to be 50 and the long-term at 41. And I've heard different numbers that I just don't have in front of me. So I'm just a little confused, but most of all, I didn't want to decrease the number of electrified bike parking because I see that as the way for the future. And I wanted to add an additional 2 charging stations, which is probably not that complicated, for mobility scooters within the building for staff members to use. And there is already identified 2 outside the building. So that is my motion, I guess, in a nutshell. I was looking to retain the electrified spaces because that is a very viable method. I see people commuting all the time by e-bike, especially to much farther areas like Esquimalt, the dockyard, etc. And it's way faster than trying to drive those roads with a car. So I think that's a very viable thing, and it also ties into the amendment to how many showers you have to provide, because I think that's less likely to be needed.
So I absolutely agree with what you're saying here, because it's but to me the expertise is you. If you're saying the long-term ones are going to be used greater, and you're not actually decreasing the number of electrified units, it's 35 and 35. But you make but Councillor Day has made a good point about the disability scooters. That's something we always forget, right? And I don't know if it's possible to add a couple for that, but that would make me super happy and I would support your proposal, but with a couple of spots for disability scooters. That's how I see this. Yeah.
Perfect. I'm with you.
You with me?
Yeah.
So, can we get a friendly amendment to this? So we're happy with the proposal, but we want to include 2 spots for disability scooters. Inside. Okay. Does that make you happy? Okay. And the seconder's okay with that? It was Dave. You okay, Dave? Okay, is there any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Motion approved. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, Kaitlyn. I think I'm just gonna take a 5-minute bio break. Before we get into 8.2, because you got a heavy duty one here, John. 5 minutes, so
existing amenities, identifying challenges and opportunities, and assessing the remaining utility of current assets. The plan for a public works building was born out of a need to address the reality of aging infrastructure that is reaching the end of its useful life and is undersized for current needs. A purpose-built public works building would create efficiency on site by combining functional elements which are currently dispersed and modernizing city facilities, fire suppression, accessibility, permanent washrooms, and appropriately sized changing rooms. Also, the building will provide the city with a post-disaster EOC, which is something that Colwood does not currently have. The building described in the report would support these needs. Tonight, staff are seeking direction from council on whether to proceed to the next step.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Day, if you want to start her off. Question.
Thank you. I don't really have any questions at this time, but I'm concerned about doing this before we've looked at our strategic plan, because it's a very large financial ask that will require that we go to a referendum. And that means that we need to be really clear in what our goals are and what our staging will be before we make those detailed plans that we want to take out to the public for support. I think we need to know how that fits in the big picture of all things that Colwood needs. Not because I don't want to address the needs for our public works. So I'm asking that we defer this until we've had a chance to finish our strategic plan and then come back and look at how we might make this project multitask, or all of the things that we need to do can be sort of sorted in a where they fit and how do we proceed kind of way.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jordison, did you want to, do you have a question, or do you want to make a comment on the question for, okay, go ahead first, and then I'll come back to you, actually. Oops. Councillor Jordison.
So John, I just had a question about the EOC. I thought this was our EOC.
Yes, we do have that designated as our EOC. However, it's not post-disaster. So if there was a major disaster or earthquake, we would not be able to re-enter it to use it functionally as an EOC. If it were included in this building as a post-disaster building, we would be able to utilize it in the event of a disaster after the incident occurs.
Okay, and I just wanted to add to that, that I do agree with Councillor Day in I wouldn't want to see the work that's been done on this plan to, not be used in going forward. It's a good plan so far, but I'm just not sure that we're there yet with not having our strategic planning done. And, I think some of us have some other ideas. I mean, this is the cost that is here is for an admin building, but I've, noticed in other municipalities that there's a combined building per se that seems to be, a little bit more expensive, but you're getting a public works building, a fleet building, and all the spaces you need in one. So I guess I'm not saying to squash it, but I don't think we can push forward on this at this time, just because it was a past council's push to do this, I guess, and I think we need to look at where the money's coming from for this. And we have a lot of competing priorities right now. I'm not saying staff don't matter and that it's important, but I think there might be other ways to mitigate the situation right now until we get some further planning under our belts and in what we're pushing forward with. I just think that we might need to think outside the box in the way that this plan has been laid out, and think of ways to bring in revenue on this site so that we can afford some of these things and just have a better plan.
Thanks very much, Councillor Jordison. Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will support the motion to defer when it comes along, but I will say that I am in favor of moving this forward. Whatever that looks like, I think we have a responsibility. Firstly, safety. What we're being told here is that our current EOC isn't survivable for a post-disaster scenario, whereas a new building would. As far as the size or the scope of that building, you know, if we're going to defer, then that's a moot point at this point in time. But the reality is this community is only getting bigger, and the emphasis on public works for our city is going to be increased as our population grows. And we have a responsibility to our staff to provide suitable work environment. I mean, we're here moments ago talking about end of trip facilities and electric bikes and all that. I'm going to bet dollars to donuts if I head out back there and ask about the showers and where you park your electric bike. I'm going to say that we fall way short. So what are we saying to people who are building in our community where we have two different standards? So I can't stomach that personally. I get it. There's questions about the finance. There's questions about the size of the building. But the reality is this city hall building is, you know, nearing end of life and is at capacity. So the ability to extend this building into another decade, perhaps by offsetting some of the capacity issues to a secondary building, I think is an option that we should be exploring and is creative and would be something I could support for the future. So for those reasons, I am supportive of moving this forward. I get that this has been inherited from the previous council. So, you know, some council members are playing catch up, but I do believe that we do need to do something, and it's our obligation to do something. The what and the how much and how it's funded, and you know, how we spend the infrastructure dollars that we were awarded from the provincial government. You know, there's a lot of questions to be answered still. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Grove.
The idea of pursuing the strategic plan discussions has some merit. I'm not quite sure how that fits, but I think that most of this proposal, what we're looking for here, is within that realm. And with any kind of continued cohesion through past council or future council, we're always going to be dealing with different councils on a project of this scale. So I'm not sure where we can come along and make such significant changes. There's so many fundamental things at risk here, to retrofit those trailers with fire suppression, for instance, or and of course I concur with much of what was said about safety. The EOC needs to be survivable. It's logical, and if it's working for the public works, it works for City Hall. It's something that needs to be built. The plan utilizes a lot of different elements on the property, which is significant in size, and we have the opportunity to start into that right away. I support this. I personally feel like I don't need to wait, and I understand the business of financing. It's spoken to in the report as well, and the city's capacity to borrow. If we don't, or consider future councils and loading them with debt, let's not load them instead with lack of decision or bigger issues or bigger problems at that time when they come to it. If we do defer somewhat, I would likely support it, but I don't see the need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Probably in the same vein as some of the other comments. I mean, I absolutely think our staff, you know, are in need of improved facilities. You know, we see trailers out there on the lot that date back to incorporation, and you know, and I think staff have done an admirable job to cobble together, you know, bits and pieces to make things work. There's often an unfair sort of cynicism that comes about when you talk about public sector workers. You know, you say, oh, 4 guys on 1 shovel kind of thing. And, you know, and I think our community deep down recognizes the value they get. You see it every year when it comes time for snow clearing. You know, suddenly there's this recognition that, you know, that the public works crew do a really admirable job. We get, you know, decent bang for our buck. So I support doing something for them. I think the only caveat that I would add is that I don't know if this is the perfect proposal because it's the only proposal. And I kind of work in the rule of threes. Like, I'd like to see some options. In fact, I would even go as far as saying, you know, it's a lot of money. And if we're going to spend a lot of money, let's make sure we're spending the right amount. It might even be more. And I know that sounds a little off the top, but, you know, I think, Mr. Mayor, you alluded to it when you were talking about aircraft hangars in another meeting we had. And I look at this building and say, okay, this is the hub of it all. This would be the EOC. This has the administrative space and things like that. A future ancillary piece to that would be kind of the maintenance bays and sheds and things like that. And I have to question that with the delay in costs and inflation and things like that, would it be more cost effective to look at an all-in-one scenario? And I know that we were provided some additional sort of construction cost estimates, but it's about a 20-page document. You know, I would have liked to have seen a proposal to say, okay, it's going to cost you $9 million to do this thing, and it's going to be, you know, 14 to do this thing, and then we could make a decision. So the only reason I would consider deferring is not because this team doesn't need improved facilities, and that we don't want to be an employer of choice here. It's that I want to make sure we're making the right decision and we're spending the right amount of money, whether it's more or less.
Thank you very much. Just a quick question for you, Mr. Earl. Impact. If we were to defer this impact, aside from the fact that we have to live with inflation, you know, and costs probably will go up. I understand that, but is there any other impacts that you can think of right now?
This is an important item, not an urgent item, other than, as you've described, construction cost inflation has typically outpaced the cost of borrowing. And so historically, those municipalities who have borrowed to build infrastructure earlier rather than waiting to save up to build it later have actually come out financially ahead because they've gotten in front of construction cost inflation.
Okay, thank you very much. So I don't think, from what I heard around the table, my own feelings right now is that everyone knows that this is required. It's a timing issue right now and where it is on the priorities, because I think another thing that's on the agenda tonight is there's a $14 million price tag to it. And that was a bit of a shocker to me. You know, another one. And I forgot, oh yeah, the pump house. Oh, that has to be moved too. And that's a couple $1 million, I think, too. And, you know, there's so many things here. And then, you know, and I understand maybe we haven't sat there and did our strategy. You know, we're close, from what I understand, to getting this thing done, but to understand that, so we have the big picture and what we should be doing first, I guess, is, so, you know, I don't think there's any one person here that said, oh, they don't need it. That's not here. It's just when. And so I guess that's the way I look at it, because I have a number of questions, for example, right now that I was going to ask you, and maybe it goes to the point of Councillor Ward's question about sometimes 3 bids, like this was one company. And I know how we did this. So, I mean, it's not unusual that we use a consultant to help us, you know, go through this. But, you know, when you actually do the bid, I think you have to do a 3-bid process, I believe, for the amount of dollars on this, Mr. Earl, I believe. But then I guess when I looked at this, my first reaction is like, oh, well, let's do, well, how much is this per square foot? $846 a square foot, you know, for administration building, you know, and yet today I found out something that was way higher, but I understand why. You know, we were up inspecting another facility, and when I got their dollar cost per square foot, I went, holy mackerel, you know, because I was thinking of when I was building my own house, I could build this high-end home for about $450 a square foot, right? And here ours was sitting at $846, I think, based on the square footage. And so I think, like I said, everyone thinks it's, you know, we know it's important. We have to do this, but it's the when, I guess, right now. So on that note, I will go to you, Councillor Day, if you want to make a motion, please.
I will.
Oh, sorry. I'll turn you on.
I will move that we refer this item until after the completion of the strategic plan.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Jordison, discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Okay, motion carried. Thank you very much, John. Okay, we're gonna move to 8:11 or 8:10 right now. It was 8:10. Mr. Bourhill, you're gonna talk about the Colwood Waterfront Stewardship Plan.
Thank you, Worship. So before having our coastal engineering consultants present their detailed engineering analysis, I'm going to review the draft waterfront stewardship plan and the next steps associated with this project. Given the extent of tonight's agenda, I will move quickly through these 4 sections of the presentation. It's a shortened version of the same that was recently presented to the Waterfront Stewardship Committee by Paul DeGrief, our lead consulting landscape architect on the project. So as this project has been much benefited through collaboration with Songhees and Esquimalt nations, I want to reiterate our respectful acknowledgement that we're meeting on to discuss the draft waterfront stewardship plan on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people. As outlined in the second page of the staff report before you, the process to compile the waterfront stewardship plan started in 2021 with the development of a needs assessment and shoreline assessment reports. Preliminary design concepts were then developed and shared with the public and partners, including local First Nations. Feedback was collected on different options for park improvements, and policies were brought back to the Waterfront Committee and Council. Further refinements to the concept plans were then made, and a draft waterfront stewardship plan was presented to Council in December of 2021. At that time, Council asked for additional information to address estimated costs associated with future storms and optimization of design to minimize damage for cost of repairs. The detailed coastal engineering analysis of the waterfront stewardship plan prepared by Associated Engineering and DHI consultants was compiled to provide this information. Staff are now recommending that the relatively minor design changes to the plans they recommend be made to the draft plan, and that staff engage the public and partners, including the Esquimalt and Songhees nations, on the final draft plan contents and potential naming of the waterfront multi-use pathway. As Council knows, the city was successful in obtaining a $6 million grant through the Canada Community Building Fund to construct the waterfront multi-use pathway, and the city now has 5 years under the agreement to complete that component of the draft waterfront plan. So the draft plan before you is one that comprehensively lays out a 10-year vision for the Colwood waterfront to improve park amenities, protect habitat and archaeological sites, as well as to increase the accessibility to the foreshore and resilience to the impacts of climate change. It closely reflects official community plan policies, including the call for the implementation of nature-based solutions and the application of Green Shore principles. I'd like to note that we are now in discussions with the Stewardship Center for BC on application of its Green Shores program here in Colwood, and the potential for our city to be a national leader as the first community to apply nature-based solutions for coastal management on a community-wide scale. So central to the plan is a series of ecosystem restoration projects and facility designs that help protect sensitive habitat. The draft waterfront plan is, as validated by the detailed coastal engineering analysis, is also designed to be resilient, such that it protects park infrastructure from the effects of sea level rise. And it also uses materials that are thought to be easy to repair. As required by the official community plan, it showcases excellent examples of site adaptive planning to show that the city is walking the talk when it comes to site adaptive planning design. It also proposes major improvements for pedestrian safety and includes various design elements that would greatly increase accessibility to the waterfront by individuals with disabilities. Sorry if I'm going too fast. The draft waterfront plan would implement various goals and policies contained within the OCP, as well as the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. It also has benefited from extensive efforts to gather community input through multiple rounds of engagement, with this next phase intended to focus on Esquimalt and Songhees Nations input on the draft plan. As proposed, implementation would include various policy actions to pursue partnerships and conduct regulatory reviews. Initial phases of implementation are grouped within the plan around the construction of the multi-use pathway, adjacent park improvements, and ecosystem restoration areas. 2023 revised costing will be included in the draft plan pending council's decision tonight regarding incorporating the changes contained within Associate Engineering's report. So the backbone of the plan is, of course, the waterfront multi-use pathway, which will guide visitors away from the roadway and sensitive habitat areas. To save time, I won't go into all the detailed park improvements included in the plan. Part 4.3 of the plan provides background rationale, conceptual designs, and general specifications. Other proposed improvements is divided into 6 sub-areas shown on the map on the screen. So that concludes my expedited presentation. I now ask that Mr. David Ford of Associate Engineering be given the opportunity to present their detailed engineering report.
Thanks very much, Iain. Questions? Councillor Day.
Thank you. The plan calls for the expansion of the use of riprap, a shore hardening that I had always thought was inconsistent with Green Shore's modeling in everything that I'd looked at or attended. Quite a few times they've been at AVICC or UBCM. Can you please explain how that fits with the Green Shores?
Thank you for that question through the mayor. And I had intended actually to pass the baton to Mr. Ford, but happy to answer that question. He's going to be speaking to more details as the specific work that was done at the request of council in 2021. But the recommendations around riprap are really focusing on existing areas of riprap. There's no proposed addition to those areas beyond a bolstering of the existing coastal defenses that use that type of construction. You're absolutely right. That type of hard arming of the foreshore is not advocated within the Green Shores principles. However, there is an acknowledgement in the practice of nature-based solutions that in certain cases and certain types of infrastructure, we need to work with a higher level of safety and use what's available in terms of coastal defenses as they're placed on site. And if Mr. Ford has anything to add, he may be able to assist.
Yeah, thank you. And hopefully Council, Mayor and Council, you can hear me with respect to that last question from Councillor Day. Unfortunately, some areas of the Cobourg Peninsula and Colwood's waterfront is fairly constrained, and for typically Green Shores principle to work, the shoreline would have to be extremely shallow in terms of a slope, which would extend any proposed erosion protection works into kind of the foreshore area and potentially into, you know, some very sensitive habitats. So in some instances, we would be restrained as practitioners by the slope of the foreshore and having to go towards that tried and tested solution of riprap, unfortunately. But we can go through a little bit more detail if you want as we go through the presentation, or some questions at the end.
I have one more question for you just before you give your presentation, I guess. And that's, I didn't notice any consideration for the, I guess the word is biology, it's probably the wrong word, but the birds and mammals and plants that we're trying to create space for. We haven't identified who they are and what their needs are as yet. It seems to be very focused on the engineering side. So I'm just wondering, where does that fit, and did I just miss it?
Your worship, if I may. Fantastic question. It is understandable, given how long we've been working on this plan, that at the outset, council did ask for a comprehensive review of biological issues that need to be considered. So part of the multidisciplinary project team included a team of biologists that included an impact assessment as part of the shoreline assessment that was conducted at the initial stages. And feedback from that study went into some of the concepts, including the salt marsh restoration and dune restoration ideas that are now being brought forward in the draft plan.
Okay, thank you. And I believe the pedestrian bridge is still included in the plan. And I was particularly concerned for the potential disturbance to nesting areas at the toe of the lagoon closest to the washroom building that currently exists. And has that been considered?
Thank you for that question. So the what was called the Hope Bridge that connected Lagoon West Park and Coburg Peninsula was removed from the options that were brought forward to the public based on concerns as you just outlined. So the current draft before council does not include that feature.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
It's going to be Mr. Ford now, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Hopefully everybody can see the presentation on screen there. Perfect. So yeah, as Iain pointed out there, my name is David Ford. I'm Senior Water Resources Engineer with Associated Engineering. And my colleague, Jessica Wilson from DHI Water and Environment Incorporated is on the call as well. Jessica's a coastal engineer with our project team partners, DHI. So as Iain outlined, we were engaged to support refinements to the Waterfront Stewardship Plan conceptual design, specifically as it relates to wave overtopping analysis. Just before I continue, I wanted to just say I'm presenting from the unceded territory of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh and Musqueam nations. And we acknowledge all the Indigenous people who have cared for these lands since time immemorial. And we make this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation and gratitude to those whose territory we reside and work on. So the big driver behind this analysis was wave overtopping and dialing that in terms of estimating how that could affect the construction and operation and maintenance of the multi-use pathway, and basically getting greater granular detail on that. So that's what the project objective in the bold lettering and the bold sentence down at the very bottom basically summarizes, to refine the eventual Colwood Waterfront Stewardship Plan elevation and dimensions to limit damage due to wave overtopping. So our project scope consisted of site reconnaissance, a technical review of concepts, and then detailed wave overtopping analysis, and then recommendations, reporting, and some high-level costing as well associated with that. So the overtopping analysis itself involves the technical review of the concept, looking at the various environmental drivers, such as the total ocean water levels, the wave conditions and sea level rise, and then characterizing the shoreline, and ultimately using the mathematical formulae that we have to hand as coastal practitioners to come up with an estimate of overtopping rates. And then we would adjust those wave overtopping rates to determine future crest elevation. So limiting wave overtopping became the kind of working backwards to give us an optimum crest elevation for the multi-use pathway and associated infrastructure, the CWSP. So in terms of the technical review, just some kind of high level things to note. At the time, the D&D property at the north of Coburg Peninsula was unknown in terms of its intended future use. I think that's been resolved or is about to be resolved right now. In the Milburn area, we noted that there was a spatial constraint with regard to road access to existing properties. And within the perimeter park area, we noted that there may be a need for detailed geotechnical and geomorphological analysis, basically erosion analysis, because of the sandy bluff nature of that area. So in consultation with the city staff, we landed on a design life for analysis 50 years. So the multi-use pathway would have a 50-year design life. And we would focus on a 1 in 100 year probability event. So based on statistics, that gives us a 39% chance of encountering that type of event throughout the lifetime of the waterfront stewardship plan. The 50-year design life and the 1 in 100 year design event is based on best practice for other similar applications and projects, both locally as well as globally. We took water levels and wave data from the 2021 CRD study that we completed as part of our work for, it was the sea level rise inundation mapping project, which gives us a water elevation of about 2 meters geodetic to the new datum CGBD 2013. And we use the most up-to-date Natural Resources Canada sea level rise projections. And we took a median value using what's called the relative concentration pathway 8.5 scenario. And that's based on the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's 5th assessment report. And I think that gives us just above 500 mil of relative sea level rise at the end of this century. We then took cross sections through the shoreline at 17 different locations, and we had wave data at each of those cross sections. And the whole point of the analysis is basically to translate those water wave heights to ultimately what is the wave overtopping rates experienced at those transects as they basically break, as those waves break and run up surfaces on the shore. So this is an example of one of the transects, or two of the transects rather, within the analysis, and our various sea level rise and tide conditions applied. So this is an example of what the existing overtopping rates were calculated as. There was quite a lot of overtopping encounters just to the northeast of the lift station. That was the most vulnerable area of Coburg Peninsula. You can see an overtopping rate of 100 litres per metre per second there at Transect 10, which is where the proposed viewing platform is proposed to be located. And using the Eurotop manual, which is kind of the industry standard for wave overtopping estimation, you can see that 100 litres per second could lead to significant damage to grass or highly protected promenades or other types of infrastructure. We obviously would want any design for the waterfront stewardship plan and the multi-use pathway to be protected from that type of damage. So that's when we basically reviewed these numbers with city staff, and we kind of landed on tolerable discharge rates, basically standards of design to limit the cost for operation, upkeep, cleanup, etc., maintenance into the future. And we landed on these particular rates. So 10 litres per metre per second means that it's tolerable for an aware pedestrian, and 20 litres per metre per second limits damage for dunes, grasses, but it's still dangerous for cars and people. So it basically means that towards the northeast, beyond the lift station, that it would be closed off during storm events, which is a continuation, I believe, of an existing practice. And crucially, the wave overtopping into the future for the lift station would be within tolerable limits for that type of infrastructure as well. So these are the proposed overtopping limits. But for us to achieve that, that requires a change in geometry of the proposed conceptual design for the waterfront stewardship plan and the multi-use pathway. Essentially, slopes need to get softer, and the design crest elevation or surface elevation of the trail needs to raise slightly. So these are just some varying limitations of the analysis, and please feel free to run through the slides and ask any questions at the end. But some of the big limitations of the approach is that it's not the same approach to deriving a traditional flood construction level. FCLs are traditionally more conservative and based on more remote return period events. And obviously sea level rise, though we have a good handle on it, there's always the danger that some of the uncertainty may come to pass in the next few years, depending on how our emission scenarios go. And as I said, determination of future crest elevations basically involves softening the slopes and increasing the elevation of the trail to limit wave overtopping. And some of the high level recommendations then, in Perimeter Park, as an example, the proposed waterfront plaza would be shifted seaward. So that would basically reduce the plaza elevation and obviously the material fill requirements as well, which would make it easier to stand up basically from a geotechnical perspective. Around there as well, there's a proposed boardwalk that would need additional study just to understand how potential erosion could expose piles and could expose the structure to wave action. That would all occur during detailed design. Around Milburn area, there would have to be some consideration for riprap protection of the existing access road to those properties between Perimeter Park and the lift station. At the lift station, it was found that should be able to withstand wave overtopping into the future. And then as you move to the northeast, the general recommendation is that there will be a little bit more space required to soften the slope of the proposed dune raising along Coburg Peninsula, which may require the removal or reduction of existing parking or proposed parking areas as you move towards the end of the peninsula. And in terms of costing, we came up with some very high level costs. As we chatted through with city staff, there has been significant cost fluctuation in the last 2 years in construction, as was alluded to in one of the earlier discussions. Therefore, we decided to increase the contingency costing to account for the significant volatility that we've seen on all of our construction projects, unfortunately, in the last 18 months. But the current waterfront multi-use pathway project is a subcomponent of the overall CWSP. So that's just to caveat that 12 million number at the very end. So with that, I will end the presentation and I'd welcome any comments or questions that Mayor or Council may have.
Thank you very much, David. Great presentation. Just the term WUNRF, what is that? I was looking for the definition of that. What is that?
I think so. WUNRF and Jessica can weigh in a little bit more because she was actually in Europe recently, more recent than I was. It's more of a concept of like a living street. So I think it's characterized in Europe by pedestrianized or half pedestrianized streets with cobbles and basically a lot of vegetation. But maybe Jessica, if you want to weigh in there and give a little bit more context.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I think that's a fair definition, Dave. I think for the purpose of our coastal engineering design, the WUNRF kind of section has these kind of crescent little beach structures that are effectively, I think someone was mentioning that the riprap isn't entirely consistent with green shores, and one of the measures to get it more consistent with green shores is also to basically cut sections of that existing riprap slope and include these crescent beach type structures within that. Obviously the upland side is this kind of pedestrian living area, but that connects to the shoreline as well, where we try and add additional living space and recreational space.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a very detailed report, and I do appreciate it. And I do appreciate the work of the committee to get us to this point. And I'm excited to see some of this at least hit the conceptual, get to the conceptual phase. There were some renderings, and it is exciting. So I am happy to move the recommendation, Your Worship. I don't have any questions, and I don't think the recommendation is asking for much. They're looking forward to, I guess they're looking to incorporate some of these details and also move forward with consultation, which I'm fully supportive. I'll move that. Thank you, Your Worship.
Can I get a seconder, please? Okay, Councillor Grove, discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll ask a question. All in favor? And that's, oh yeah, we don't have, that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Motion passed. Thank you very much, Iain. Okay, we're on to 8.4 or 8.3, the tree removal request, 608 Kelly Road.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here tonight to speak to recommendations that were made for this tree permit for 608 Kelly Road from the Environment Committee, as well as speak to a staff report with some new information regarding the property as well. In working with the resident and out doing some measurements with on the property, it's been determined that actually none of the trees are in the city right of way. They're all private trees. We were able to see an older, neighboring property did some measurements, had their property assessed, and there was actually, we found the markers that we could measure from, and both trees that we thought were on our property are actually on the city property. So in that, there are some trees that could be saved, 4 trees that could be saved with some work on the resident, but then those trees would all be their trees to maintain, and their increased risk of failure liability on those trees. So staff being out there on site, doing some measurements, seeing the constraints of all the way the root systems are, what the resident would like to do, as well as the arborist reports, both arborist reports saying that to reduce all risk, if you're going to remove the trees that need to be removed, you should remove all the trees. And I'm here to answer any questions on that.
Councillor Day.
Thank you. Did the city pay for either of those arborist reports?
We paid for an assessment for the trees, yes, one of the assessments. Yes.
Okay. And what sort of cost was it to pay for that?
That assessment for the 2 trees that we did was 300, I believe.
Okay. Yeah. So I read both of the assessments, and I feel like we've missed the boat on the motion that I raised about tree protection, which was I'm trying to ensure that there's a really good reason to remove a protected tree. And it's pretty clear to me that all of these trees should be protected because they're a native species, they're of significant size, that they qualify as a protected tree under the bylaw. And there, in both of those arborist reports, none of the trees are deemed to be unsafe or sick or dying, or and the rationale for removing a tree should be of a scale, you know, like if it's a little small tree that's easily replaced, maybe it's a lesser argument. But when it's a larger and more significant tree, I think the argument should be greater to remove it. So the issue with any foundation, the foundation isn't built yet. Where it's an issue with the driveway, they seem to have a large amount of driveway on the property. It looks like they have 2 driveways. And I understand that we only allow for 1 driveway. So that hasn't been dealt with. The driveways are not that terrible that they couldn't be repaired. And the sewers in that area were recently turned down by the residents, and tree retention was at least a part of that discussion because the trees are important to many. And because what they want to do is, it's not about damage to the existing building, but it's about not being able to build in their desired manner. So in fact, they could look at a different design or a different driveway configuration or another way to address these things. And the trees are not in and of themselves the problem. The problem is that the trees are in the way of what they would like to do with the property. So if that's a fair assessment, that's not site adaptive planning. That's not saving anything. That's losing everything, simply because of a desire to build something in a location where trees already exist. So I'm really wishing that we would enforce our tree protection as a tree protection, not as a tree permit for removal bylaw, but as a tree protection bylaw, because they're significant, they're healthy, they're not currently destroying something that was already there. They are in the way of future development in a certain way. That's not to say that they couldn't accommodate still doing some sort of addition to the home, but just not in maybe that way that's being proposed.
Just in some of so there are several surface routes all through the driveway there. And I believe that the resident is looking at making a more traditional driveway, but either way, they're going to have to deal with some significant routes within doing that. I do believe the resident is trying and would like to see some trees saved, but there would definitely be some increased cost to the resident as well as liability if any of the trees are removed. We are bringing forward stricter revisions to the amendments to the bylaw, hopefully tonight at this meeting. And I do believe even with those amendments where we're putting onus on the residents to prove that, you know, there's no other way around other than removing the trees, we would still be looking at this same situation, even in that.
Only because you're not choosing to prioritize the trees. The bylaw is to protect the trees. It's not to protect people's development potential on their lot.
Agreed.
And I live with significant trees. I have bigger issues with my driveway. I've solved those issues. And so it is possible. You can have a raised driveway or you can add things to it. That I just find this very difficult that we're not making more of an effort to protect those trees because they are significant and they're significant to the area.
It is why we're here to make that decision as to protect them or not protect them. There is a choice to.
There
not allow
shouldn't be a choice. They are, by definition of the bylaw, a protected tree.
Yes. Agreed.
Due to size, due to species, they're Douglas fir trees. They have a significant value, not just as living trees. If they cut them down, they'll be worth thousands of dollars. And that's what we've been through this before. The tree issues in Colwood go a long way back to people logging areas of Colwood because they didn't care what the fine was because the trees are worth so much. I really hope that we would be on the side of protecting trees because they can't be replaced. It'll take 50 years to grow a tree that looks like that one.
Thanks very much, Councillor Day. Councillor Jordison.
I just wanted to ask, in regards to this urban forest strategy, is there an explanation or definition or something to explain clear rationale for removal, or are we trying to put forward a strategy or policy or whatever that we just can't cut down trees of certain species or what have you? Like, I don't think the intent of the urban forest strategy is to save all trees at all costs and not, cause the residents significant costs and turmoil. I think that there has to be, it has to be defined maybe what that rationale for that would be accepted. Is there anything in the forest strategy, that urban forest strategy, that suggests what the rationale could be?
Part of the urban forest strategy is to make revisions, significant revisions to our urban forest bylaw, which will, along with the amendments that we're proposing for tonight, interim amendments, and that will, right now in the bylaw, it does state exactly what a protected tree is. I think we're going to be expanding the recommendations for revisions on expanding that list, as well as increasing, making it, smaller DBHs to include a protected tree, increase the cash in lieu. It is too low right now, and it to be relevant to be able to replace trees. We would be, I am reviewing the tree replacement plan that was submitted with the permit. I'll be reviewing that with the resident. At first glance, that looks like at the 2-to-1 replacement, the city would be able to take 8 to 10 of those trees and replace them in Havenwood, Colwood Creek, with the use of including the green team, Friends of Havenwood, to help mitigate the costs that the current cash in lieu doesn't cover. But the urban forest strategy will speak to to revisions on the bylaw.
Councillor Grove.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. trees, as I understand it, as this was discussed in the Environment Committee, have a rather high crown due to pruning to clear the power wires. And that crown is at a higher level than would normally be recommended. The power wires, it seems to me, are close enough to at least 2, if not 4 of the trees. I don't recall correctly, completely, but they all seem to be pruned at a very high level. The point being that if the trees that did seem to have some danger to the wires, etc., maybe be removed, then exposes the rest, potential blowdown, etc. It's already kind of an exposed stand, the streets right there. Anyhow, the suite that is proposed to be built in this property, as I understand it, is for a multi-generational comparison. If this was a developer in a larger property, I think we'd be hard pressed to find ways to maintain trees at this level. Not that we don't work toward keeping them, I understand completely, but there's a gas line that runs through that's, I understand right now, in the route, traveling through the route areas, as is potential future sewer and other infrastructure. So, and I took a look at the site, and the driveway is significantly damaged. The appearance of a second driveway is actually kind of an RV padded storage. It's a concrete storage pad for the RV, which is not actually a second driveway, I believe. So given all of this information, and in a time when we're debating the efficacy of increased density building and providing housing, it seems to me that that is a good reason to build, to add, and perhaps cut these particular trees, as they seem to make that project difficult otherwise. How does that assessment fit into a notion of protecting trees? There is a point where if you cut down a half, the rest are threatened by wind. And we had a significant discussion at the committee meeting about this. And I know that the recommendation from committee was to have you work with the proponent, which you've done and you're doing, and I appreciate that. And the new information makes it all that more interesting, because I'm not sure how that would have proceeded otherwise. I personally think that I support this because I believe that what is proposed for the property and the reasons for it outweighs the value, the protection of the trees, is simply that perhaps our replacement tree bylaw could be enhanced so that there's 2 trees of a small size don't go very far towards replacing one mature tree of this size. But those trees aren't all supremely healthy either. They're rated, as I recall, in fair condition, with this mention by the arborist of the high crown, which seems to me is a threat to the tree already. They've been altered quite a bit. Anyway, my tendency is to support the removal or to endorse the tree removal permit because of the nature of the project. Wasn't much of a question there, was there?
Councillor, please.
Thank you. Just very confused by this, because these trees clearly meet the criteria that's set out in our tree protection bylaw. They do meet the criteria. The rationale for removing them is for something that does not currently exist. The house, the addition, that doesn't exist. The sewer line doesn't exist.
That's right. The gas line has been, to my knowledge, has been disconnected because it is in danger. It runs through the roots. The water line currently runs right through the middle of the large stand of trees, so it's running right through the root system. The current bylaw would allow these trees to be removed through the permit process.
But the trees meet the definition of a protected tree, and yet you're not protecting them.
The current bylaw allows the resident to get a permit to remove the trees on private property.
So the bylaw doesn't actually protect any tree. That's what you're telling me. We went through a lot of money and a lot of effort and a lot of time to create a bylaw, pardon me, to protect the trees in Colwood. We've asked developers to do site adaptive design. It's gone through OCP. We've said that, yes, that's what we're going to do. We're going to protect the trees in Colwood. We're going to try to mitigate the tremendous amount of loss that we've had to our tree canopy. But you can apply to take down the tree that's defined as a protected tree, and they don't even need a good reason. It doesn't have to be unhealthy. It doesn't have to be interfering with their foundation, but it's okay. You don't need to make a good argument to take it down. You just have to want to take it down.
The current bylaw definitely says that. That's why we are bringing forward amendments to that bylaw.
Well, I'm very disappointed, and I would like to move that the tree removal permit be denied.
Do you want to comment before I go to the motion? It's your first time, Mr. Jensen.
I'll come back.
Okay.
There's a second.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for this motion?
Iain,
Yeah,
second.
okay. Okay, I'll open it up for discussion. Councillor Jensen.
Yeah, thank you, worship. You know, it's a good discussion, and I do believe, in my opinion, that the tiebreaker should always go to the tree. But when I'm hearing that, you know, they've had to turn the gas off to the property, and now the water service is in jeopardy or in question, you know, I think that's concerning for those residents. And you know, quite frankly, I don't believe our bylaw deals in absolutes, Councillor Day. I believe there's all sorts of exceptions that are spoken to, and in essence, that's why we're here. One of the exceptions is a finding of council, and so I think this is the appropriate route to take. And you know, I believe this is a homeowner looking for a solution for their property. And although I'm not a big fan of bringing down mature fir trees, I'm, you know, I believe our staff have the interests of the community at heart and are doing the best they can in difficult circumstances. So, you know, to be accusatory that somehow there's some kind of malfeasance or something that we're overlooking or we're fast forwarding this decision taking, I don't think I think it's a big leap in logic. We're here discussing this to come up with a finding. And I don't think, you know, I think it behooves us to come up with a finding and move this forward. Thank you, Worship.
Great, thank you very much. I'm just gonna make a comment here. I don't remember reading this about the gas line being cut off, and where was that?
Yeah, on the property, when I was out there making measurements, the gas line has been disconnected so that they can move the gas line.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, because
Okay.
it was
So,
through roots.
Yeah,
as
because, you know, a lot of these mitigating factors in the water lines, the same thing that wasn't mentioned in the, you know, they talked about some things that supposedly might happen, but, you know, it's just, I guess I akin this to, you know, when a developer comes in and tells us, you know, he gives us the great plan, and then he goes out there and he cuts down our forest, and then it sits there for 5 years. You know, and I guess this is kind of what I'm worried about. Like, is this real or is it not real? I don't want to question the person's integrity or anything, you know, but it's just, that just catches me, you know, and it gets me right now. And, and if it's true about the gas line and because like I said, everything was supposed, like this could happen, this could happen, this could happen, right? That's how I read the report. And so I'm just looking at it from my own head, right? And I went, okay, but it hasn't, you know, it's could, so I'm gonna go cut down these trees. That's how I looked at it. And then so, but if you're telling me, what you're telling me is true, I mean, I don't have any, I'm not doubting you any. But I guess, does that mean, you know, because that's the situation now. So does that mean some of these trees have to be cut down then? I mean, do all 7 have to be cut down? I mean, I guess that's my question right now. I know they talked about when they were gonna cut down 7 of them, then it makes the other 2, they would fall down because you don't have the protection of the other 7. And that made sense to me because I saw that happen in the forest behind me. You know, they cut down a bunch of trees arbitrarily and then every arbutus fell down because it needed all those other trees to stand up, for example. So I'm just relating that experience in my own head. But in this case now, you know, the situation is, okay, gas line interference, water line interference, you know, what has to be, you know, or they're mitigating that by, it sounds like you said they're moving the lines.
Yes, they will be installing a new like a new water line, gas line, and I believe they want to do a sewer for the future. Not that the sewer needs to be done at this point.
Yeah, I mean, that's up to the city too, to make sure we have a sewer line out there too, so.
But there definitely is interference with the gas and the water line at the currently.
Okay, I just wanted to get that clear in my own head because I was surprised when you said that because it wasn't in the reading, so. Okay. Oh, okay. Counselor Day.
I just want to make the point that cutting down the trees is not the only way to solve the water line and the gas line problem. Obviously, those 2 lines have to be rerouted. They can be rerouted without cutting down all the trees. I've done it in my own driveway. So I know what it's like to live with trees. I have 13 very large trees in my front yard. I know they're not easy to live with, but cutting them down is not the only option.
Okay. I'm seeing no other discussion. I'm just going to call the question right now. All in favor of the motion? Oh, sorry, to deny. So there's, and all those opposed. So opposed is Councillor Grove, Councillor Jensen, Councillor Olson, and
Opposing denying the chief.
Yeah. You're in favor of the recommendation then? Oh, okay. So it's just, okay, so yeah, I got Councillor Ward. So the 3 that, or the 4 that opposed, Councillor Jensen, Councillor Olson, Councillor Grove, and Councillor, sorry, no, Councillor, no, Councillor Ward was 4. Sorry. So.
Kim Jordison says she is
4
in favor
of
of
your
denying of my motion
okay.
to deny.
So the motion actually passes then. I'm sorry. I misunderstood this. Councillor Grove is in opposition. Councillor Olson is in opposition, and Councillor Jensen is in opposition. Yes. Sorry. Yes.
That was all very confusing, and I think it behooves us to be absolutely clear on what we're voting for, because I'm now confused about the confusion, so maybe we should just be very specific so we don't have to revisit this.
Okay, so the motion that was put forward by Councillor Day was that we deny the approval of this of the request to remove the trees. That was her motion. And it was seconded by Councillor Ward. And so when we put the vote, all those in favor, right? I want to make sure. Councillor Ward said I was in favor of the motion. Councillor Day was in favor, and Kim was in favor, right? So there's the 4, so it carries. Okay. So you got the people that are opposed then, Amanda? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Next. Development variance permit 783 Cuaulta Crescent.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll also introduce myself. My name is Kelsey Fielden, planner 1, if I have been introduced to a few of you here. I'm here to answer any questions about the land use and planning, or the planning and land use committee. We also have the engineering lead, Deanna, here to answer any questions about the active transportation, and also the property owner is here to answer any questions that you may have.
It's pretty straightforward. I was going to ask for a motion for the staff recommendations. We get discussion going. Does anyone want to make the motion? Okay, Councillor Grove, second. Okay, Councillor Olson. Okay, so I'll open it up for discussion. It's straightforward, but any discussion? Okay, Councillor Day.
Okay, my first point is that we've received several letters from the neighbors, and it's clear that the applicant has not achieved the neighbors' buy-in for this development. In my opinion, it brings no real benefits to Colwood. 4 houses instead of 2 with no amenities or direct contribution to community well-being. Cycling and pedestrian infrastructure is not improved by this development and may be impeded by the reduced setback. And the shared driveway is problematic, not because it is shared, but because it is too narrow. Ambulance and fire truck access requires 6 meters, and any less has been shown to be a problem in many areas over many years. Some areas of Langford have consistent issues with residents parking in front yards and cul-de-sacs not designed for parking, making it nearly impossible for emergency services to access the homes or for road clearing during the winter. There have been significant increases to the requirements for snow clearing in Colwood on smaller road rights of way, and many were permitted as private roads in order to gain their approval without meeting our standards in subdivision. So the expectation was that it would be maintained by the strata or the owners, and they've later been serviced by in the winter by the city of Colwood crews in compassion for the homeowners living there, resulting in increased maintenance costs for all residents as the roads did not meet our standards, require more time or special equipment to maintain. So narrow accesses require emergency service to work harder by having to park farther away to service the location if you have to bring somebody out on a stretcher for an ambulance, or if you have to get a fire truck in there. So to effectively address the housing shortage, we need practical homes that have adequate transportation options and that cost less to operate and maintain, including the tax burden that they bear. So I'm recommending that we deny the subdivision because it doesn't meet the needs of our community.
I'm confused, sorry. This is for a DVP. It's a variance.
Yeah, it's a variance for Walter Crescent.
Yep.
For what is one lot to be subdivided into 4.
But I'm just looking at what the recommendations are, and that is that the DVP request to vary frontage works to nil for both frontages of 783 Cuaulta be denied. That's the first recommendation, so I agree with that. And the developer provide a cash in lieu amount equal to the cost of constructing the frontage works in the future, which is absolutely great for the citizens of Colwood. And that further that the development variance permit number DVP 23004 for the lands at 783 Cuaulta Crescent, which would have had the effect of varying section, whatever, blah, 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 to decrease the front yard setback from 7.5 meters to 7.2 meters for the existing dwelling on the proposed lot D be approved. And last one is section 2.1.167 of the land use bylaw number 151 to decrease the minimum width of an access strip from 6 meters to 5.333 meters on proposed lots A and B be deferred for further information. So that's the recommendation. That's the motion.
Okay, so.
That's okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Trying to be efficient.
Thank
Sorry.
you, worship.
Sorry.
I'll yield to Councillor Day.
Okay,
Thank you. I'm
Councillor.
sorry, just trying to finish up here. I tried to be efficient and have things written out in a Word document so that I could take less time. Didn't work. I understand they don't, that the recommendation is not to vary the frontage works and that cash in lieu be given for the frontage works in the future. What I disagree with is the reduction in the front yard setback from 7.5 to 7.2 because you have less room to work with. And the decreasing the access strip is, for me, it's a no-go. If you want to get more information, I don't know what that's going to do for us. Everything that we've done has, over the many years that I have been here, has shown that shared driveways and narrow access ways are problematic for all of our emergency services. So I'm not in support of it.
It's deferred though. It's a deferral though for more information. So you're not approving it. So the only thing you are the only thing you're actually looking for is the decreases going from the 7.5 meters to the 7.2 meters. That's the difference. That's the only thing. And the fact that this went through active transportation committee with their recommendations and the planning land use committee. I don't know enough facts about it, but I'm sure it was discussed around the table. So I'm putting a lot of faith in their recommendation. Anyways, okay. Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I did have the pleasure of chairing both those committees for this item here. I could perhaps give some brief context because I know the hour is getting late, but the committee had no problem whatsoever with supporting the cash in lieu item. That was a no-brainer that passed unanimously. As I recall, they also, the part they approved, or we as a committee approved the 7.2 meter setback because it's for an existing building that predated incorporation. And that was kind of the line in the sand that the committee, we discussed that it was unreasonable to expect them to move the building for the sake of, 30 centimeters or what have you. So that was, that passed easily as well. And then now there was some lengthy discussion about the road width. We did seek information about the width for emergency services, and a staff advisor was no issue with that. And a quick calculation, I think that's like 17 feet of width, and that's plenty for an ambulance or a fire truck. And the net benefit of the reduced cross-section for the shared roadway was that a significant stand of trees could be saved at the property line. Now, there was some discussion, and the discussion, there was further discussion about though that that roadway, the entryway, there was some question about that it's a shared roadway, or there's some usage by the neighboring property. So it got a little murky as to whose driveway it was, and whether there's going to be a need for some kind of right of way access for the neighbors, what have you. And that's where the committee chose to defer. We severed those two items, the one past the 7.2 meter, and then the roadway width was deferred. Although the discussion did indicate that no one really had a issue with the width, in favor of the stand of trees that could be saved, but it was more about some of the access issues. So that was the committee's discussion, Your Worship, and I'm not sure if that helps the discussion any or makes it murkier.
No, thank you very much. It was really good summary. Thank you. Councillor Grove, I'm gonna try to move everyone along real quickly here. Councillor Grove.
Is it my understanding the stand of trees is about 50 trees? Is that right? That could be saved? It was a fairly significant number, which was impressive. The existing house is just under a third of a meter, so it's about a foot. I think that makes sense. So everything I read here, I thought worked, and I took the recommendations of the committee to heart. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I am going to call the question right now. All those in favor of the recommendation. So the motion is the recommendation per your agenda. All those in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Motion passes. I'm gonna jump. I'm gonna change the order here because it's getting tight here, and I know we got some pretty mean councillors here that don't like to take it late, but there's one that has to be done tonight for sure, and that is 811. I'm going to jump down to 811, which is the contract award, the 2023 paving program. I think Tanner, you can come up, but it's pretty well self-explanatory. If you want to add anything, that'd be great.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. No, I'll keep it short. Just a recommendation that Council award the asphalt paving works to Capital City Paving in the amount of $393,128.49. And I'll just leave it at that. And if there's any questions, be happy to answer.
Because basically, it has to bring to the council because it's over the $250,000 limit. Okay. Okay, please, Councillor Day, one question.
So in the report, it mentioned the possibility of optional add-ins, and I wasn't understanding if the amount of $393,128.49 included additional amounts, or if it just included unit prices, so that I wasn't clear who's going to identify what the additional scope creep, if you will, might be. Is it included, not included, and do they identify it, or do you identify it?
Thank you. Anyone who bids puts their extra work unit price in the bid. So actually in the 393,000, the extra work from Capital City is included, and it still came in under our secondary bid. So that was the portion about the elongating the work or enlarging it. So that is included in this quote.
And the additional work is work that you would like them to do.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Can I get a motion for the staff recommendation then? Okay, Councillor Jordison, seconded by Councillor Grove. Discussion. Call the question. All those in favor? You're making it, Councillor Ward. I can't believe it. That the motion passes. It's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go back on to the next one, which is 8.5. Sorry for changing the order here. Development variance permit 651 Allandale. That's the Ford dealership signage.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here to answer questions regarding development variance permit 23003 651 Allandale Road. It's for signage at the Glenelg Ford site. It was brought to the Planning and Land Use Committee last week. As well, the developer is here to answer any questions. Kelly, if there are any. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, pretty straightforward. Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Worship. I'll be brief. I had the pleasure of chairing this item, or chairing the committee where this item came forward once again. it passed by a significant majority, and there were some commitments made by the developer even to work with staff on some of the lit signs and our dark skies, et cetera, et cetera. So it was recognized, and in fact, some of the hours that the lit signs might be lit for, again, the developer committed to working with staff on something reasonable for the community, which was to the pleasure of the committee, and the rest of the discussion was generally positive in nature. And what flowed out of that was 8.6, which I will move next after this one, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor Day.
I just wanted to add the comment that it seems like it's a big increase over what our sign bylaw recommends, which our sign bylaw was trying to dial back the number and size of signs that we see in Colwood because they seem to be taking over the world sometimes. But I do support this, having looked at the way they're going to be on the building and what our expectations are for buildings of that type.
Thank you very much. Sorry, you're gonna move it? Yeah, I think you did. No, did you? Did we have a motion or not? Okay, so let's get the motion. Okay, Councillor Jensen and Councillor Jordison seconds. All the question, all those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, thank you. The motion's carried, unanimous. Thank you. Okay, moving on quickly here, sign bylaw review. Yes, this was basically this came out of your committee. You need to update the sign bylaw. Okay, I'll let you take it over and motivate Councillor Jensen.
Thank you. This did come from our discussion. I will move the recommendation, Your Worship. Our sign bylaw is, it doesn't fit with our current OCP, and it was pointed out by committee members that it's time, and I think we recognize that it is. That's about it. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I just would like to ask that when we do look at our sign bylaw, that we consider ask staff to provide a summary of the recent approvals that we've done. So that we have, but rather than just throwing it in staff's court to give us the answer, I'm asking that they give us the summary of what we've actually been approving, and then consider what we want. Do we want signs all over and a strip mall effect throughout all of Colwood, or do we want more effective signage with more beauty in between? So that's, I don't want to discourage commercial endeavors in Colwood, but I would really like it to look better than how it looks on the Colwood strip. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Do you make the motion? Yeah, you're gonna make the motion. Okay, Councillor Jensen makes the motion, seconded by Councillor Grove. And I'm gonna call the question. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Motion carried. Thank you. Now we're motoring here. Active Transportation Committee, 8.7. We're gonna make it. Oh, 1, 2, 3. We only have 3. We only have 3 left. So can I, Mazza, do it right now? We've only got 3 items left right now. Can I get a motion to extend? Yeah, we should get through this. Okay. Councillor Olson and seconded by Councillor. I want Councillor Jensen to second it. Jordison. Okay. Okay. Grove and Jordison. That's great. Okay. We shall all in favor? Well, 30 minutes, no more than 30 minutes. Okay. Councillor Ward, 1 o'clock is time now. Okay, thank you very much. So we're gonna go till 10:30, please. I think this is for, yeah, no, sorry, it's Active Transportation Committee, yes. Right? You're away, Ian.
Thank you, Worship. So on tonight's agenda is a recommendation from the Active Transportation Committee. I can read the recommendation if that would be helpful. That the Active Transportation Committee recommended council that the option to situate sidewalks at the edge of the road or street right of way be always presented to council for consideration when sidewalks are being designed for arterial and collector streets and roads. And that when possible, staff come back to council for direction. And further that the draft 2023 Colwood Active Transportation Network Plan be adopted for master planning purposes.
We've already passed that. That's passed before.
Ostensibly, your worship, the wording in the previous resolution was a bit different, but yes, council did give us direction to continue to use the draft plan for master planning purposes, for work with developers, and consider it as a guide in its draft form. I can read the previous resolution if you'd like, but
okay, so it's not the same.
It's certainly be up to council's discretion whether they consider that the same, but the wording was slightly different.
Mr. Earl?
Your worship, staff were advised to use the draft document for master planning purposes.
Right.
I think the difference in this, the recommendation from committee was take the word draft off it and it becomes our official active transportation plan to be used for master plan purposes.
So, but it says draft here. And we haven't approved. That's a
Sorry,
different,
your worship,
yes.
in the current motion and further that, oh yeah, so to remove the word draft.
So that's a different discussion though. I think personally.
If your worship, I believe that the draft 2023 Active Transportation Plan was just the wording that was used from the staff's material presented to the committee. I believe their intention was to, as Mr. Earl stated, to make the draft the adopted version for master planning purposes.
But my point is that's a different discussion. To me, we haven't approved, we don't have an approved one yet because.
Yeah, you haven't approved it. So you're asking us to approve it and the plan isn't even on the agenda.
Your worship, just to clarify, the recommendation is from the committee. So I can read council's previous resolution from the January 30th council meeting for clarity. So that council allows staff to continue the master planning process, work with developers, and consider the active transportation network plan as a guide in its draft form. And that the draft active transportation network plan be referred to the Active Transportation Committee for review. And further, that the draft active transportation network plan be referred to the Intermunicipal Advisory Committee for Disability Issues for review of the accessible portions of the plan.
Right.
So both of those steps were taken. The information that was received by IACTI was general in nature and has not yet been reported to council. So it's up to council as to how you want to take the further steps relative to the recommendation from the Active Transportation Committee.
Okay, my own opinion right now, this is just my opinion at this point in time, is that this hasn't gone through the proper process to me. It's popping up as, you know, it says draft. Okay, I can live with this, but we already said that before. And before, I'd be curious to have a presentation on, you know, the findings of the committee and IACTI. You know, you said you got the comments. I'd kind of like to know what was the overall discussions and items that were brought up, and then you can bring it in for approval. You know, but until that point in time, to me, I'm not about to give you a point. This is just me speaking. I don't think we should just give you carte blanche and say, you know, it's approved, because I don't know. Yep. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Mr. Point of order. Point of order.
So yes, I appreciate you were all first. I'm gonna try
Oh,
and
it's
end
point of
this
order.
right now. I'm confused. Other people are confused. I make a motion that we defer this to a September meeting, your worship, so we can have a more fulsome discussion and include the requisite attachments that some council members wish to see, as would I. Thank you.
Okay. You still want to speak to that, Councillor Day? Okay. Go ahead. And then I'll get to you. Councillor
Okay,
Jordan.
I'm trying to be very short, but I actually didn't get the referral in time for the meeting that they could have actually got participation from all of their members on it. So they scrambled to get you something before they could provide any comment. But it's been very rushed, and I really think it's important to take their considerations into account.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jordison.
I actually have concerns about the motion that I made. The option about the sidewalks, because my intent of making that motion was to make it clearer than the one that was provided by Councillor Kobayashi at the time from the previous council. And this motion, so just to give you some background, this was on the fly motion that I put forward at my first meeting as chair. And I didn't have the original motion that Councillor Kobayashi at the time had made to refer to. We didn't put it up on the screen, so we never really saw what the motion was. So anyway, long-winded explanation. This is not what my intent was, unless you can tell me that it means the same thing. My motion was to be worded as such that all arterial and collector streets and roads that sidewalks are to be placed at the property line. That is my motion. That is and that if it can't be done, that staff are to consult with council to explain the reasons why and to seek further direction. So I have concerns with the way that that is worded now, because that could go sideways.
Just a point of order here. So this is the motion, like everything you're saying is great, Councillor Jordison, but the motion is for referral or deferral, I guess.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, but you talked, and I get that, but okay, I can wait till to September to change it, but I'm just annoyed that it's on there that way. And anyway. Okay, that's fine. And the active transportation, it's not approved, so.
So, Councillor Ward, do you want to talk to the motion? Sorry, I see.
I do, yes.
Okay,
Mr. Mayor, the motion is on the table now, so it no longer belongs to the individual who made the motion. It's up to the table. So therefore, I would move to amend the motion. Instead of deferring, I would motion instead that we sever the two items, the sidewalk item and the active transportation network plan, defer the active transportation network plan to a later date, and address the sidewalk option now by putting forth new wording, exactly as Councillor Jordison had said, that all sidewalks on collector, arterial, and streets and roads must be placed to the property line, and any exception must come before council, essentially, or wording thereof. So that is an amendment to the motion that I'm proposing, and I'm looking for a seconder.
Seconder? Councillor Jordison. Okay, discussion on the amendment.
Motion for the entire thing by making a new motion.
I'll ask Mr. Earl. Mr. Earl, could you clarify what's happening here with Mr. Roberts' rules here?
I don't have 100% clarity. My memory is that a motion to refer or defer, what you can debate is the date and nothing else.
Yes.
That is my memory.
Okay, so
And so
yes,
you can debate whether you're going to defer to September or June, but you shouldn't debate anything else. A motion to defer is used by an elected official to stop debate and move the issue.
and I knew that too. Yeah. So when do you want to defer it to?
September is good. We can come back and square
Okay.
it up.
So so we're gonna have to back up here, Council Ward. Did you hear what Mr. Earl just said?
Respectfully, yes, I disagree. I'm not entirely certain that that's, I mean, it's open to interpretation. I believe that you can amend a motion to defer. I don't think you can amend I'm forgetting the word of it when you seek to end discussion prior to the item coming to the table. But respectfully, I'm not 100% on it, and I don't really want to look it up at 1 a.m. So I will accept the motion if put forward by Councillor Jensen and seek a vote on that then.
As chair, I'll make the judgment call here. I'm just gonna defer everything here. So that's the call I see. Every time I've seen a deferment, I don't see an amendment to a deferment. So I've never seen one actually. So you may be right though. Maybe we're gonna learn something new, but I think I will go for the deferment till September for this motion. Sorry? Yes. Any other discussion on the motion? And so the motion, Amanda, please repeat the motion. We're getting giddy here.
That the recommendation from the Active Transportation Committee be deferred to a future I think you decided September, a September meeting. I believe the meeting in September is the second, I don't have a calendar right in front of me, but it's the second Monday in September.
Okay, sounds good. Everybody hear that? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Oh, Councillor Ward opposes. Motion carries. Okay, guys, just hang in with me. Just two more. Pesticide use bylaw. Gord?
I promise to make it really fast. So the pesticide use bylaw, the recommendation is that council direct staff to conduct public engagement on the draft pesticide use bylaw number 1995-2023 through the Let's Talk Colwood platform and engage local stakeholders such as the school districts, SD 62, Royal Rose University, West Shore Parks and Recreation, and the Royal Colwood Golf Course, and that staff be directed to create public information and an education program to accompany the pesticide use bylaw.
Thank you very much. Councillor Olson?
I'm so happy to see this come back. And to end the evening on a positive note, I would like to move the staff recommendation. I'm really happy to see that this is returned and also sort of partnered up with your integrated pest management policy. I know that there's going to be some cost implications for the educational component of this potential bylaw, but I think it's vital to sort of transition people away from using bad pesticides and educating them on what their alternatives are. So thank you for all of your work on this. I really appreciate it. And I think the community does too. So that's it. I'd like
Can I
to.
get a seconder? Okay, Councillor Day.
And I just
Okay,
want to
and
speak
go
to
ahead.
it.
Yes.
Briefly, it's a great motion, except for the fact that we're creating the public information and education program prior to getting the feedback. It looks like, just because we're doing both things at the same time here. I think we need to be prepared for consideration of potentially reducing the number of pesticides that we approve the use of. We did have public participation tonight to speak to exactly that many of the ones, there is a long list of them, and that many of them do have some negative impacts, even though we're putting them on our approved lists. So just to be open to change coming from the community feedback that we get.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, call the question. All those in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Motion carried. Last item, urban forest bylaw, 1735 amendments. Gord, again, you're on.
And I'll just read the recommendation for that as well. That's council direct staff to conduct public engagement on the draft urban forest bylaw 173501 through the Let's Talk Colwood platform and engage community stakeholders. So once again, this is to add stronger language to our urban forest bylaw for the interim while we work through quite a bit of revision through our urban forest strategy to redo our urban forest bylaw.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Day.
I'll use the recommendation and just add that I hope we can get to a point where it's actual protection and not greenwashing to allow the removal of trees, and that we start identifying where our significant trees are in Colwood.
Seconder. Councillor Jensen. Okay. Discussion. Great. Call the question. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Motion carried. Thank you. Motion for adjournment. Councillor Jensen and Councillor Day seconds. All in favor? No, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Iain, for joining us all the way from Ontario. Can't believe you made it. Very well done. Thanks a lot. See you later.